Today I have a big video for you guys, as I will go over the entire Season 3 of Wistoria. Now there's no way of knowing if this will be Season 3 or not, as Season 2 is still airing. But from the information we have, I would bet my money on it. Anyway, this season is honestly absolutely insane, so be ready, as we will go over the Traitor arc and the Gotia arc. With that out of the way, let's jump in. We then see Claire once again saying that there is a traitor among them, and that seems to shock a bunch of them. Colette then screams out and asks her what exactly she means by traitor. After that, we see the cat that was just peacefully sitting there. She suddenly jumps and says that she will explain it all. After that, she transforms into Ceridwen, and she tells all of them that on the night of Terminalia, the gate to the tower was opened. Only a mage of the tower can do that. We see Rose just looking surprised as she asks who she is. Ceridwen just smiles brightly as she tells her that she is Greslouis's gracious and humble master, but that they may call her Ceridwen. Julius just looks at her annoyed though, which is kind of funny. Anyway, Ceridwen keeps going as she says that, as they all saw before, the gate into the tower can only be opened by a registered high mage. The gate wasn't broken, it was simply unlocked, certainly not a feat any monster could achieve. She continues as she says that if Dinoboros, wielding the mage killer, had managed to infiltrate the tower, the situation would have gotten much worse. Add in a pincer attack from the Devander, and the lives of even the Magiavander would have been at risk, explaining that on that fateful day, Regarden was truly on the brink of collapse, but not by some coincidence. A nefarious actor brought regarding the edge of ruin. This visibly shocks a lot of them, but Ceridwen says that thanks to Will's efforts, the assault was thwarted and the worst did not come to pass. But the issue remains. The gate was opened from within the tower, and senior leadership is determined to identify who did it. With that, we go over to Claire, who looks fired up as she points to all of them and tells them that a task they now pose to them, she hereby assigns all of them the following order. Infiltrate their respective factions and investigate anything and anyone they find suspicious. We then see Emma from the Wind faction as she asks if she is entrusting them with such an important task. Mike from the Dark faction also speaks up as he asks her if she knows that they just graduated from the academy after all. But we then have Sion, who is super cool, as he says that he assumes that they at least have an idea of who their would-be antagonist could be. Ceridwen starts to look intense as she tells him that they believe it to be the Tome of Ruin, Gohita. She continues and tells them that 10 years ago, their world was as close to annihilation as it has ever been. When the Magiavander were killed, the day of Doom's descent, the destruction organization Gohita was the instigator of the war that brought forth that terrible day. They suspect their remaining supporters are behind this, Will then thinks in his head, as he says the beast that he and Elfie fought 10 years ago. It was a mana creature that ran away from the war in the city, but he then starts to think about the headless mage and wonders if they were somehow connected to Gotia. But he quickly moves back out of his thoughts, as Claire tells them that if they really are dealing with the remnants of Gohita here, they have to carry out this probe with the utmost discretion. As a mediator belonging to no faction, she, Creolisera, implores them, for the good of their world, to find the traitor and remember every mage in the tower is a suspect. With that out of the way, we then see the gang walking as usual. Julius speaks up and says that it was not the order that he imagined that they would get so soon after joining their factions. Colette says that she is still in shock. She doesn't want to believe there's a so-called traitor lurking in the tower. Wignall is next up, and he tells them that he can't bring himself to suspect his own comrades. Besides, they elves are far too dignified a people to commit something so nefarious. Sion just tells him that it doesn't really matter if he can't, does it? Saying that unless he wishes to be an outliner, and the only one to skirt the order. With that, we head to Lihana and Will. Lihana just asks if they want her to probe the Thunder faction, and she looks practically dead as she says that. Will then tells her to start talking, and asks her what's the matter with her. Lihana looks super crushed as she says that he will soon find out soon enough. Just then, we cut to Colette rubbing her face and saying that essentially, they want them to play spy and root out this traitor. It pains her to have to pry into her faction's business, but they are the only ones they can trust to do the job. She then calls them Team Lihana and tells them that it's time for some spying, and after that, she just has a super bright smile on her. But with that, we go to the following day and to the tower and the second stratum Earth faction. Here we see Colette sitting on a throne. Someone says that at long last, their prayers have been answered. We then see a bunch of old people saying that Colette Loire, rightful heir to the Loire family, is officially one of them. We first up see Fulun audited. He screams out that earth magic is scant in the tower, and as they can see with all these geezers around, they lack a certain feminine touch. We then have Hammond Fossilis. He also has a smile on him as he says that for 20 years they have been rolling downhill, but not anymore now that they have got a young lady in their ranks. Then lastly, it's Worgen's prey night. He clenches his fist and says that better yet, this lass has the blood of a house that once produced a Magia Vander running through her. With that, he screams out to everyone that their time is now. He then turns around and says that, of course, to his Rose, his dear granddaughter, he will throw her this kiss for guiding Colette to them. Rose can be seen blocking the imaginary kiss while telling him that she didn't guide her to anything. She made the decision to enter the tower herself. We then see a super embarrassed Colette as she asks Rose what is going on. Rose tells her that they just expect great things from her. She is their brilliant Colette, their Earth princess. We then head into Colette's brain as she thinks that, forget being a spy, she feels more like the creator of some weird religion. With that out of the way, we head over to the third stratum and the Ice faction. Here we see Elfie curled up in her chair as she screams out for Will, explaining that she needs him with her here. Sarissa is by her throne as she tells Elfie that it's enough with the hysterics, telling her to get up and greet their new recruits like a real Magia Vander. We then see Julius, who looks a bit lost as he explains that this is why he told Will to join them. After that, he walks forward. He calls out to Elfie as he says that he has heard much about her from Will. By his words, she is a beautiful, kind soul for whom he cares very much. It is a shame. Will could not be here with them, but he believes that he would want her to present herself as the noble, dignified mage he knows that she is. Julius just then prays to himself that this will work, and surprisingly, we see Elfie sitting back up with a smile this time as she speaks up. She says that she offers congratulations to them all for joining the Ice faction. May blessed waters and brilliant ice always be with them. She continues and says that her recruits this year are some of the finest they have ever accepted. But Julius is perhaps the most promising, and they expect a lot from him. Julius just tells her, alright, and that he gets it. We then move back to Elfie, who says that now, if they would please lend her their strength and assist her in taking back what was stolen, help her reclaim Will. With that, we see Julius thinking that just maybe he chose the wrong faction. We then move on to the 6th stratum and the Elf faction. Here we can see Wignall bowing to Elena. Lefia told him that 6 years ago, he left Alpha Skoger to attend the academy. Filvis adds that he was unable to skip a grade and was thus left behind as the only elf languishing in a classroom. After that, he can hear the other members talking. They say that he's no smarter than a common Lizance, calling it hard to believe he belongs to the royal house of Lindor and that he is a stain on great Eleanor's name. Wignall looks to be close to his breaking point as he thinks that he can't take it anymore. He holds his chest as he thinks that he feels as if he is in an interview where he isn't allowed to speak, calling it pure torture. But suddenly something that looks round gets thrown to him. Wignall asks Eleanor what it is, but she just tells him to put it on. Wignall gets shocked as he asks if it's a gift and is about to thank her when she starts to look insane and asks him who said that it was a gift. She walks to him and gets creepily close to him as she tells him that it's a collar, as any fool could tell, telling Wignall that it's the perfect accessory for breaking in those who shame their people. She then just looks more creepy as she tells him that as long as he has that around his neck, he will not escape her, asking if he understands, and Wignall is just lost, wondering what is going on. After that, we yet again move on to the 5th stratum and the Fire faction. Here we see Cariot using his fire ability right at them, and it's massive. We then see Scion super damaged and on the floor. Meanwhile, Cariot can be seen just laughing as he then apologizes to them for the explosive welcome. But saying that this is the quickest way to test them, he continues and says that they may not understand it just yet, but this is an initiation by fire, one to weed out the cans from the can knots, so to speak. Cariot explains that they lost plenty of promising mages during Terminalia, Rog included. He had hoped this year's seedlings would make for worthy replacements, but it seems he was too hopeful. Cariot is then about to leave as he tells Logwell to take care of them, but before he can do that, Sion speaks up and tells him to wait. Sion still looks super hurt, but he tells Cariot to keep going. He even begs him to please continue with the initiation, telling him that he has to become stronger than Will, and that he will do whatever it takes. Cariot looks at him before he starts to smile, and says that perhaps he spoke too soon. This year's harvest may shape up to be the most bountiful yet. We also see Sion smiling as he heard that. Moving on to the 4th stratum and the Thunder faction, here we can see Guilford telling them to keep running, and that he better not catch them slacking, screaming at them to run until they drop. We then see Will, who seems fine. Meanwhile, Lehana looks to be close to her breaking point. Will then asks her if she is doing okay. Lehana tells him that she is fine and to just keep his eyes forward. We then head into Will's brain as he thinks that now he finally gets what Lihana was talking about. What faction makes their mages run non-stop as part of their training? After that, we head back to Guilford, who tells them that he bets that they are wondering what building physical strength has to do with training to be a mage. But they don't need to wonder anymore, as he tells them to listen up, explaining that from the mightiest muscles comes the mightiest magic. A mage with a flimsy frame can't even hope to call upon thunder as an ally. That is why they run. Run as their life depends on it, like they are running from a hungry beast. With that, we see someone called Milia Zaza. She calls out to someone called Olgano and asks him what lap he is on. Olgano tells her that he is on 80. He continues as he says that Guilford's getting on his nerves and that he is thinking of picking up the pace a bit. We lastly have Nanaru, who is just silently watching this. We then head back to Will, and he sees them dashing forward. He thinks that they've barely broken a sweat, and now they are picking up the speed. With that in mind, he thinks that he has to show that he can keep up with them. But just as he is about to lock in, he hears Lihana falling behind him, so he looks back at her. However, we see Lihana just being completely drained on the track. Just then, Guilford goes to her. He asks her if she is sleeping on the track again, telling her that it's not a good look. He goes closer to her and tells her that she just loves to keep her head down. Asking if she wants him to step on her now, Lihana tells him that it's not that, of course. But even then, Guilford goes and steps on her head. He tells her that he can see right through her. She came here to play the gallant knight just so she could flirt her way into Zio's favor. Lihana tells him that she would never do that and that he isn't her type. But before she can finish that, Guilford already kicks her as he tells her that she better watch her tongue. He tells her to listen up. When he is in charge, nobody gets special consideration, not even her. Guilford then asks her how it feels to be treated like everyone else. We then cut to the other, and Olgano says that there he goes again. Torturing the newbies, screw the dungeon. The real beat lives on the 4th stratum. Milia adds that he's been going extra rough on them for a while now. Will just looks at them running away, and that makes him a bit upset. With that, he decides to take action himself, as he goes right in front of Lihana, and tells Guilford that he will run however many laps Lihana has left, telling him to please let her rest a bit. Lihana just calls out his name before Guilford laughs as he calls it a mess, saying that friendship is forever, asking Will not to make him puke. He then tells him, all right, and for Will to give him 100 laps around the track right now, and we then see Will, who easily does just that. Olgano admits that he has got spunk, and Nanaru explains that he is fast. We then see Guilford, however, as he tells Will that they in the Thunder faction are known for pushing their mages to their absolute limit. If he didn't know, then he is going to learn today. Telling Will to go ahead and do another 100 laps, Will tells him, all right, and he is then off when he is done. Guilford tells him to do 200 more, which is then followed up with 300. After that, it becomes 400, and lastly, we have 500 laps. I also like how it took so long that Guilford got out his beach kit as he was just chilling and watching Will suffer. We then see Will being down on the ground. Guilford comes to him and asks him what's the matter, asking if he is all tuckered out. Will apologizes but says that he is. Guilford then gets right to his face and tells him that Will thinks that he is some kind of hotshot just because he is a sword, telling him to think again because the truth is that Great Zio doesn't give a solitary damn about him, asking if Will can hear him. While they're going on, we see Milia stretching as she says that the newbies don't know that he makes them run until they drop, no matter what, so there's really no point in trying. Olgano joins in and says that he has to admit that he is something. It's the first time anyone's broken 1,600 laps. Nanaru says that it's a new record and calls it cool. Anyway, we then see someone familiar coming. Will is just almost dying, but Zio takes him by his shirt. He then holds Will high up to the sky and tells him that they will now spar, telling Will to make it fun for him, or else. While that goes on, we see everyone else bowing to Zio. Meanwhile, Will just wonders how he is supposed to be a spy under these conditions. Anyway, after that, we change to some very daunting table with a ton of masked men sitting around it. Someone asks how the plan is coming along. Someone else tells them that it's going quite well. They are beginning to pick up the slack from Terminalia, saying that Mars's and Headless's failure cost them precious time. To make matters worse, they're involved in another entirely separate plan. Someone else just tells them to leave them be, saying that it all serves one purpose, liberating the true sky. The mages hold the key to unlocking the heavens. He then says the name Baal and explains that they want to seize it. Suddenly, someone starts to walk towards them and laugh. They say that Shade likes the sound of that. It then seems like the person who we can guess is called Shade jumps up on the table and says that she guesses that what Gohita wants, Gohita gets, telling them to leave it to her and that there will be nothing left when she is done with them. And to be fair, she looks pretty scary. Anyway, after that, we change scenes back to Will and Zio. Here we see Will lying on the floor, and Zio asks him if he can even call that a fight. Will looks at him and apologizes, but Zio just then starts to smile manically as he tells him that it's a good thing that he can use his magic sword, telling Will that they just need to whip him into shape. Then he will be able to cut down anyone in his way when Zio is done with him. Zio then starts to walk away as he tells Will that he needs to come and find him whenever he is finished with Guilford's drills so that they can spar, telling Will that from now on, his days end with him. Will just looks pretty confused, but we can then see him grabbing the grass on the ground as he thinks that sparring with a Madhya Vander is brutal. After that, he tries to get himself back up, but he falls right back to the ground due to exhaustion. He looks super out of it as he thinks that faction training is rough enough. Now he has to add everyday sparring sessions with Zio on top of it, wondering how he is supposed to make time to spy. We then move on to the others, where we see Melia, who looks mad and says that she gets that the kid's tough, but she wonders why he gets to spar with Zio and says that it's not fair. We then see Nanaru on her side, who says that the new talent is talented. Olgano agrees and says that he sure is amazing, but he then questions Lihana. He continues, as he says that she might be the exact opposite, just hopeless. It's already been how long since the first bloom, and she's still running behind. At least she's holding up better than the other newbies. However, we then see Melia looking at her as she says that she is betting she dips out and runs straight for the upper institute, just like the other quitters. There is no use staying if you can't keep up, and we can clearly see how that makes her feel as she looks crushed. Melia then starts to walk away while explaining that this is the Thunder faction. The other factions don't hold a candle to them. Nanaru adds on that Zio is the strongest, which means that they need to be the strongest, explaining that Lihana is weak, calling it so much for the Knights of Thunder, and that really sends her into a state of shock. Anyway, after that, we head right into the Thunder faction men's bath. Yeah, a bit strange maybe, but here we see Will showering. He says that a whole day of non-stop training is finally over. He explains that these Thunder faction mages are maniacs, but he then tells himself no, and that he needs to think positively, admitting that they are hard workers, and there's not a single suspicious mage among them. At least he thinks there isn't. We also see Kiki showering right by, which was kinda cute. After that, Will gets up, and he hears someone else being there, so he apologizes for the noise, and explains that he thought that he was alone, but suddenly he gets super red, and his eyes widen. He then falls to the floor as he screams Lihana's name as she is also there, showering. We see Will closing his eyes, and also Kiki holding her paws in front of them, and Will asks Lihana if she knows that this is the men's bath. However, Lihana is long gone, as she just says that she is nothing but trash, a coward, and an actual washout. Will then tries again as he asks her if she is listening to him. Lihana even then continues as she looks lost, as she explains that she was an idiot to think she could ever help her family. She is what you get when you misunderstand your own worth. Will then once again speaks up, but this time he screams, saying that he doesn't know where her head is, but it most definitely isn't here. We then see him running in the next panel. Meanwhile, Lihana tells her grandmother that she has failed, but just then, when she is in her most despair ever, Will throws a towel on top of her. This makes her somewhat come back to reality. She then looks at Will, who is shaking his head left and right, explaining that he wasn't looking and that he didn't see anything at all. After that, he turns away in a nanosecond. Lihana is just super confused, which I can't blame her for, as she then starts to wonder why she is even here. We then see Lihana falling to the ground due to embarrassment, but just then, Will speaks up and calls out to her. He tells her that he just wanted to say this. She isn't trash, she isn't a coward, and she isn't a washout like him either. Lihana is an amazing mage and a model knight, someone he trusts and respects. Will continues like the goat that he is, as he tells her that she needs to believe in herself. After that, he just asks if maybe they should continue this talk somewhere else, asking if that would be fine with her, and we then see her just freaking out, which is super funny. We then skip a bit as they go to Will's room. Lihana is sitting on the bed as she apologizes to Will, saying that she is a piece of trash, and a pervert as well. Will just looks really lost as he tells her that it's fine and that she doesn't need to apologize anymore, just go back to normal. Lihana says that she can't imagine how disappointed her dear grandmother would be if she found out how she has been acting. Will just looks at her with a soft look as he asks her if her grandmother is someone important in her life, and as she hears that, it looks like she just starts to light up. She then explains that she's the only person in her family who ever had faith in her. Will asks her what she means by faith. Liana then points to her eyes and asks if he can see how they are blue, explaining that in her house, blue eyes are a mark of inferiority, which completely shocks Will. Liana continues as she says that the blood of one of history's bravest knights, Dua, runs in their family, so everyone's eyes are the color of thunder, except hers. They've been a sore point since she was a child. We then get to a funeral where the text tells us that members of her house live short lives. Her gallant sister was no different. She died 10 years ago, protecting her comrades. We then see them with the coffin, obviously. After that, we see a really young Liana squeezing her hands as she then speaks up. She tells her parents to let her represent their house and that she will stand in for her. She will work hard and she promises. But sadly, her parents just look back at her with a cold expression. They then tell her that it's enough and that it won't be necessary, and we can then see Liana crying as she hears that. She says that no one believed in her except her grandmother. After that, we see Liana with a book in her hand and her grandmother tells her to come on and let her read. She sits herself right next to Liana and tells her not to let it bother her, telling her that one day she will make a fantastic knight and that she knows it for a fact. Explaining that having the eyes of Roche the Knight is no mere coincidence, and we then see her eyes light up as she hears that. We then quickly get back and we see Will, who looks happy as he says the knight's names. He asks if it's the same Roche from the tale of Roche the Knight. Liana asks if he has heard of it, saying that she is surprised, as it's not a well-known book. Will tells her that Elfie has loved books since she was little. She'd read tons, like The Adventures of Demna and a whole bunch of other stories. He then looks super gently at Liana and smiles while telling her that he can bet that she and Elfie would get along great if they met. Liana just looks back at Will as she says that it seems that she and Elfie have something in common, saying that she used to read plenty of stories about knights when she was a child too. Liana then thinks that it wasn't Roche's tale that truly captivated her. Roche was weak, but she used wit and good sense to gain the upper hand and protect others, including the princess. The story of Roche was one of her greatest childhood treasures. After that, we see her grandmother going behind her and putting a necklace on her. She then smiles at her and tells us that her grandmother saved her and gave her the portrait of a knight that she could strive for. Roche was who she wanted to be. Then, in real time, she looks at the necklace. Will asks her what it is. Liana tells him that it's a misericord of the covenant. It's an amulet meant to bring a knight peace. Those who bear the name Owenzaus wear it at all times and continuously channel magical energy into it so that they may fulfill their vow as a knight with honor. Liana then looks at Will and tells him that, just to let him know, she had planned to use it if he didn't get up during their battle with the Grand Duke. Will is amazed and asks if she is serious, and he then apologizes for that. We then head into his brain as he says that it seems Liana's been battling demons of her own. Despite her family's less than favorable judgment of her abilities, people still call her Miss Perfect. It's a true testament to her hard work. Will then speaks up as he tells Liana that he wanted to ask her something. He asks her how she approaches running laps for training. Liana looks at him, confused, as she asks him what he means by how, telling him that she puts all her physical and magical strength into running as fast as possible. With that in mind, Will tells her that next time, try turning it down a notch. He tells her that he has been observing how some of the senior mages run, and he has noticed none of them are constantly channeling magic. They use as little as possible, as efficiently as possible. Liana says that she sees that the true purpose of all the mindless running is to break them. Will then adds on to it as he tells her that what they really want to see is what they choose to do after they are broken. Liana looks confused, but Will explains that they wonder if they will run or if they will give up. Will they rise? Like a gallant knight from a storybook, Liana just looks more surprised as she says Will's name. Will then smiles and takes out his hand to her, telling her that he knows that she has what it takes, telling her that if she doesn't mind him saying this, then he quite likes her blue eyes, saying that they sparkle like jewels. Liana starts to blush as she then smiles, telling Will that her first love said the exact same thing, and with that, they shake hands. After that, we move to the next day, and here we see all of them running once again. And like yesterday, Liana is falling behind. Guilford calls out to her. He tells her that she is pulling the rear again. He calls Liana an embarrassment to this faction, and while he does that, we only see her breathing more and more heavily. We then move to Olgano, who says that she sure is a mess. We also have Melia behind him, who says that it looks like someone's in for another day of torture. Under them, however, we have Will, who calls out to her, and just then, we see her starting to look fired up. With that, we then see her putting some magic into it, and then in the next panel, she quickly catches up with the others in an instant, which seems to shock them. We also have Will, who just smiles at her. Milia, on the other hand, wonders how she caught up with them so fast. Nanaru adds that she will be breathing their dust again soon. Olgano also says that she gets right back at them after every bend, wondering where she gets all that speed from. With that, we head into Lihana's head, as she thinks that she doesn't have as much raw magical energy as they do, and she can't maintain this speed as long as they can, but she can give herself a momentary boost, just enough to catch up, thinking that she is a Knight of Thunder, an Avenger, and that there is no way she will let herself be outdone, explaining that a knight's vow is as unbreakable as thunder is fast. No matter how many times she fails, she will still never give up. With that said, she once again puts the brakes on and starts to run forward. Melia looks at her and has a slight smile as she tells them to look at her go. But under her, it's Guilford who also has a smile. He thinks that this is what he wants. The Thunder faction is about pushing magic to its limit. The only way to keep up with Zio is to transform into thunder itself. They must become faster and stronger, fail to keep up, and they can forget about ever standing shoulder to shoulder with him. Telling them to control their pace and strike with purpose, only those who sustain their shine, no matter how dim it may be, are worthy of the title of Thunderbolt. Guilford then speaks up this time as he tells Lihana to keep on moving and to keep up the pace. With that, we see her side by side with Will, and both of them look super fired up as they run. We then move 3 days later, where someone tells them that it's time for them to go on a supply run, and Will and Lihana say that they are on it. Will says that they are making them do errands now, wondering if that means that they like them. Lihana tells him that, who knows. Either way, she feels ashamed of how relieved she feels about this break from training. Will then thinks that this reminds him. Each of the factions has spies working on digging up info, but what about the Upper Institute? Just then, however, we see that both Charles and Kreutz come from behind the corner. Kreutz calls out to Will and tells him that they will meet again. He then gets right up to his face. He tells Will that he will make him pay for embarrassing him, but he then scratches that and tells them to start over. He tells Will that he wields Wiz with such efficiency, such mastery. He says that he wishes to apologize for his unseemly behavior at the Bloom, but tells Will to please come to his lab. Will is just super shocked and confused, but Kreutz continues as he tells Will that he just received some wonderful tea leaves from the east, asking to treat Will to a cup of warm, sleepy tea. Will just asks him if it makes him sleepy, as that's kinda weird. Kreutz tells him that the way he will make it, yes, but not to worry. He can lie down on his lab table, and while he rests, he will open him and make everything better. If he is trying to be sneaky about what he wants, it's not working. We then see Charles trying to drag him away, telling him to go before he exposes himself any further. Kreutz just tells Charles to hush, saying that he and the other fools in the tower have lost their minds if they think letting this specimen go unstudied is the right course of action, explaining that sacrifices must be made in pursuit of progress. We then see Will, who tells him to stay back with a scared tone. Suddenly, Lihana gets in front of Kreutz and tells him to get away from Will and calls him a maniac. She continues as she tells him that if he lays a finger on him, then she will personally make sure that Zio hears of it. Kreutz just then screams out and asks if she has no self-respect as a high mage of the tower. Lihana just looks annoyed as she tells him that she doesn't. In fact, her pride was broken a long time ago, but she doesn't need pride to protect Will. After that, we see Charles finally dragging away Kreutz. Anyway, after that, we see Will looking around, and he spots Julius, goes to him, and calls out to him. Will tells him that his bag look is heavy and asks if he is also doing a run for his faction today. Julius tells him that he is spot on, explaining that he can't believe that they are making him do grunt work. Will then tells him that while he has him here, he wanted to thank Julius, telling him that the only reason he belongs to a faction is because of him. It's a shame that he couldn't join him and Elfie though, but even then, Will has a huge smile on his face as he tells Julius that he really appreciates his helping Will out. Julius, on the other hand, just looks at Will with a very disgusted look. After that, he points his finger at Will. He tells Will that if he really wants to show his appreciation, then he should do something for him, telling Will that the next time they are in Elfie's presence, he should talk Julius up and give her a good impression of him, explaining that he needs to be on her good side if he's ever going to succeed her. Will just smiles at that as he tells him that Julius will make a great successor. Julius also smiles and tells Will that, of course he will. The name Julius Reinberg is synonymous with greatness, explaining that when he gets to the top, he supposes he will keep him on as a retainer. Will just tells him that he is holding him on to that. After that, we head over to Slumland Street and into Hen and the Beanstalk Tavern. Here we see Colette, who tells them that it has been 1 whole week since they got the order, asking how everyone's faring. With that, we see Wignall, Will, and Lihanna being totally dead. Colette just says that she guesses each faction is tough in its own way. Will then asks her how she is doing. Colette tells them that physically she feels fine, but emotionally she could be better. Wignall then seems to whisper, but he asks why they have chosen this dirty tavern to have their gathering. But just then, something comes by right by his face. We see that it is Gina, and she tells Wignall that if he has got a problem with this tavern, then no one's stopping him from leaving, telling him to just remember to pay before he leaves, and that leaves him pretty mad. Colette then speaks up and tells him to stop it. She tells him that they needed a place to keep their meeting secret from the senior mages of their factions. Wignall says that if not for Will, he would have never set foot in this dirty hole. We then see Sion, who says that it's exactly why they chose it. No mage or elf would willfully patronize this dingy establishment. Lihanna is then the next to speak, as she says that it's time to share what information they got. She says that as fast as they could tell, there were no suspicious mages in the Thunder faction. Colette adds on that it's nothing odd in the Earth faction's records either. We then have Sion, who says that he has left the spying to Lyral and Gordon. Great sadist Carriot's running him ragged, and spying is the least of his worries. We then have Wignall, who says that, as he said, the elves would never do anything so traitorous. We then move back to Lihanna, who says that it seems that Julius is late, asking what they are supposed to do about intel from the Wind and Dark faction. Colette then tells her that she asked a couple of representatives to join. Just then, they arrived, and it's Emma and Mike. They apologize for being late, but say that trying to get here without being seen was a real doozy. Sion looks a bit shocked, but Mike then goes to sit down and tells them not to be so surprised. He didn't ask to be invited to this gathering of elites. We then head into Will's brain as he thinks that Mike the commentator and Emma the ace were pretty active around the Grand Magic Festival. Emma then speaks up and says that after all the times she has talked to Will after the festival and the bloom, it's funny how this is when they'd come together. Will just apologizes for that, but Emma asks if they can perhaps start again, this time as friends. Mike says that he would also want that, saying that he didn't bully him like Sion and the others, so he should be cool, right? He continues and says that he knows that it's a little late for saying this, but he thanks Will for fighting for all of them at the Terminalia. After that, Will tells him, of course, and they share a toast. After that, Colette speaks up and calls out to them. She asks them how things are in their respective factions. Emma says that it's a good question, but it doesn't seem like she says anything of value. Colette then asks Mike, and he says that the dark factions are too creepy to investigate, nothing but a bunch of shadowy nerds. He would transfer out if he could. Colette then says that none of them have come across any shady mages as of yet. Emma then asks and says that she's curious, asking what exactly their so-called foe is after. Lihanna says that if the headless mage they encountered is working with Gohita, then she guesses their goal is to destroy the false sky. Sion adds on that they're likely referring to the great barrier created by the Magia Vander. Mike then says that the barrier's all that's holding back the celestial hosts. If they get past that, they're then as good as toast, asking why the Gotia would want to destroy the barrier. Will thinks about just why that is, explaining that they are working on nothing here. They need more information. He guesses that they have no choice but to keep searching. Will then speaks up and says that Julius is awfully late. Colette says that he sure is. It's already way past their scheduled meeting time, ending it by saying that she hopes that he is okay. But in the next panel we see a bunch of blood. Someone says that they knew it. They were never cut out to be kind. And there we see Julius with a whole hole in his chest while calling out to Anna. After that, we see a ton of people having gathered around him. They wonder what it is that is going on here, and someone else says that a high mage from the tower has been murdered. After that, we also see Sarissa being present, and she looks sad. After her, it's Colette who asks the extremely tight crowd to let her through, but when she finally manages to reach him, she gets a very sad face and is filled with despair as she sees Julius sitting there and a ton of blood around him and a whole hole in his chest. We then see his friends rushing with all that they can. They tell him to wake up and that this has to be a joke. Colette starts to hold her hands in front of her mouth as she says that Julius can't be dead. By her, we also have Will, who just looks absolutely crushed as he says his name. After that, he goes in front of Julius's friends and right by Julius. But just then, something seems to hit him right in his head. After that, he looks more confused as he says Julius's name with a confused tone. But just then, a high mage comes by and asks him what he is doing. He tells Will to get away from him, as this is an ice faction matter, telling Will that if they don't have anything to do with this, then they can scatter, telling the others to secure the surrounding blocks and close the gate to find out who did this. However, just then, we cut to Wignall, who wonders if this could be the work of Gotia. Everyone from the pub is there watching this, and they all look down. Meanwhile, Will looks up at the sky and seems to spot an iceberg flying in the sky. After that, we head to St. Viola Square. Here we have Colette, who is crying uncontrollably. She calls it her fault, saying that if she didn't suggest that they meet up at Gina's, then Julius would still be here. Emma sits next to her and tells her to stop it, telling her not to blame herself for what happened to him. After that, Will speaks up, and it looks like he is supposed to say something vital about Julius, but in the last second he stops himself. He then looks extremely down, but Lihanna notices this very well. After that, she goes to Colette and hands her some sort of cloth to wipe her tears. We then cut to Wignall, who thinks that if Gohita is responsible, then why would they go after Julius? Mike says that maybe they caught wind of their spying efforts, but Sion then speaks up and calls it doubtful, explaining that Julius was distrustful and always cautious. He wouldn't let himself be found out so easily. Will then joins in and says that he learned something, and whatever it was, it made him their target. Lihanna then asks him what they should do now. Will tells her that they should head back to their factions. They might give them orders related to the incident. In any case, they will have to be extra careful from now on, telling them to just keep a low profile, nothing reckless. With that, we then see the group split up. Well, except for Lihanna and Will, who went back to the place of Julius's death. Lihanna tells Will that he told everyone to lay low, so she wonders why they are back here at the scene of the incident in broad daylight. Will apologizes to her, but tells her that there was just something he wanted to check. With that, we then see Kiki meowing at the ground, and Will goes down and seems to pick up something. Lihanna asks if that's a piece of ice, and Will tells her that she is spot on. Will explains that Kiki knows all of their magic signatures and sniffed out a spell. Julius cast in his last moment. Now they know for sure that this isn't some rogue mage's ruse. Lihanna, however, looks to be confused. She says that she finds it hard to believe anyone from the Ice faction would miss such a crucial clue. Explaining that they are closer to finding the culprit than they were, Will then starts to think some more and tells her that whoever murdered Julius used dark magic, and seeing as there were no signs of a struggle, it's likely the killer was someone Julius knew personally. Lihanna looks at Will and asks him how he knows that. Will scratches his nose as he says that he overheard high mages talking about it this morning. They made the fact that they found traces of dark magic at the scene crystal clear. Lihanna asks him how his ears managed to pick up a conversation like that without the help of spells is something she will never know. Lihanna then asks him if he thinks that it's an acquaintance who did it. Will tells her that he sure does. He took the fatal blow straight on. Julius was a highly skilled mage. If the spell was cast at such a close distance that even he couldn't put up a protective barrier in time, it would be natural to assume it was done by someone he knew while they were talking. Lihanna just looks at him silently. But Will continues as he says that, of course, it's a little too early to rule out the possibility of a snipe or surprise attack. Before they do anything else, he would like to talk to Lunais and Jorua and ask them if they've noticed anything different about Julius before he was attacked. Lihanna just remembers them as the two mages who were always in his company. Will then gets up and tells her to come on, and she is just behind him. However, she starts to look a bit serious, so she asks Will if he thinks that he already knows who did it. Will is silent before saying that he would be lying if he said that he didn't have a clue. But the use of dark magic he is then about to say something more, but just then, we see someone looking at him from the shadows. Will notices this, and right away starts to look around. Lihanna asks him what's wrong, and Will is having trouble gathering his words, but in his head, he thinks that for a moment it felt like someone was watching them. But he then looks at Kiki, and says that it doesn't seem like she picked up on any other traces of magic. With that in mind, Will tells Lihanna never mind, and that it was nothing. Lihanna is just super confused, but as they continue to walk, Will apologizes about it and tells her that they should head back to the tower, explaining that if they return to their faction stratum, then he bets that they won't have much freedom to roam, guessing that they will have to skip training. Lihanna is a bit hesitant, as she says that the inevitable punishment and the torment that awaits them has her scared for her life. However, while they are walking and laughing, we once again see the strange guy from earlier just looking at them before he then disappears into thin air. We then head right into the tower's first stratum. Here we see Charles being questioned by some mages. They ask him if it's true that a mage from the Ice faction was killed, asking if it has something to do with that Terminala traitor that everyone's talking about. Charles just looks a bit overwhelmed as he tells them that there's a gag order out on all talk related to the incident, telling them that he is sorry but they are not going to get anything out of him, asking them to now go back to their flying golem test, please. But even then we can see the high mages continuing to pressure him, and he tells them that they are going to get him in trouble. but just then, he looks over and sees Will being right there. With that, we head right over to Will, who is with Julius's friends. He tells them that he knows that it's been rough, but he thanks them for taking some time to talk. They are just silent, however, and because of that, Will continues. He tells them that he just wanted to ask if they remember what Julius was doing the other day. One of them just asks if he really wants to know, and they then continue. They say that he left the tower alone at night to meet up with Will and their crew. Before that, he was normal, acting like he owned the place and heckling them for coming back dead tired from training. We then get into a flashback, where we see one of them saying that they are about to pass out. The other one adds on to that. Sarissa really knows how to run a mage ragged. Just then, they noticed Julius was sitting, and they called out to him. Julius just laughs as he sees them, telling them that they sure look like a mess. He asks them if they want to grab a drink at Gina's when things settle down, explaining that it will be his treat. This just makes them super happy and touched. And with that, we head back to real time, where they say that the drinks are never gonna happen now, thinking that maybe if he didn't leave the tower to meet up with them. Will is silent before he apologizes, but then one of them screams at him, telling him not to apologize or say that he is sorry. We then head into Will's brain as he thinks that there it is, proof that Julius was attacked on his way to the tavern from the tower. Anyway, he then speaks up and says that he just has one more question. However, we don't get to see the question, just that his friends explain that Julius knew all about that mage's condition and that they had no idea until he told them about it. Will thinks that he thought so, and he then thanks them, but just then, his telephone thing starts to ring. It's Lihana, who tells him to hurry and that she has caught something. Will tells her good job and that he just had a talk with Jorua and Lunaius, and that it seemed that he was correct. Lihana tells him that she understands and asks Will if they should engage then, but Will just tells her that they are going to strike tonight. With that, we head right to nighttime, where we see Emma with some flowers, but suddenly someone calls her name. It's Will and Liana. Emma asks them what they are doing here. They just tell her that they would like to ask her the same thing. Emma is surprised and says that she is just on a faction errand. They asked her to prepare reagents for spells. Lihana then starts to look serious as she asks what those flowers are for. Emma is silent for a second before saying that they are belladonna. She picked them in the dungeon. They're quite rare, but she managed to find them. Before she can even finish her sentence, Will cuts her off. He apologizes for interrupting, but he tells her that he could have sworn that she had florophagia, explaining that it's a skin condition that makes your skin blister and causes sprouts to grow from the body when touching certain flowers. Telling her that both Lunaius and Jorua told him, Will tells her that she and Julius come from highborn families. They have known each other since they were kids, ailments and all. Will goes deeper on it as he tells her that Julius saw her holding flowers here in the first stratum. He was the first to see something wrong. After all, why would a girl with florophagia be carrying a bouquet of belladonna? That's why he thought that he would confront her before making his way to the tavern. Emma asks them to excuse her, but tells them that it sounds like an awful lot like they are suggesting she killed Julius. She screams out, saying that she would never do something like that. Will, however, looks dead set as he apologizes to her, but says that Julius was kind enough to leave them a clue. With that, we see them opening a cage with an ice bird in it. Emma is surprised to see a bird made of ice, and it even starts to fly around. Her head, Lihana explains, that they caught it fluttering about just outside the tower with no way to get in. Will adds on that, with that strength he had left, Julius summoned an ice guardian. Lihana then told him that guardians are self-acting. They do only what their summoner asks. Julius mustered up all the energy he had to make sure this guardian stayed active even after his passing, and to this guardian he gave the order, fly above the culprit's head. With that, we see it going blank behind Emma as she looks crushed. After that, she drops the flowers, and Will tells her that she is the one who attacked Julius. We then get a close-up of Emma as we see her starting to laugh, super creepy. But not long after, she gets out her hand and starts to create a dark magic beam attack. It seems like it's heading to Lihana, but here I'm a bit lost, but it looks like Lihana uses her thunder magic to direct away the attack, before then sending Emma a thunder attack of her own, which even manages to send her back a bit. Lihana then tells her that it's enough of this, and asks them to show themselves. Will adds that Emma is a wind mage, and that she isn't a Multos. She's not capable of casting dark magic, continuing and explaining that this Emma is either an imposter, or she's being controlled by a puppet spell, which we then see is sure as true as we see a character called Shade from the Gotia, and she does look pretty cool, but she also has a ton of chains around her. Emma and Shade then look right at them with a smug expression as she tells them that they got her. She then continues as she tells them to come at her and calls them little kitties, explaining that the two of them make for the most adorable pets. It then looks like we get into a flashback to Emma, who is shaking. She calls out to someone called Ian, saying that she tried and did everything she could. But in the end, she couldn't save them. We then see Shade slowly approaching her, telling her that this is what torment is for her, explaining that it's even pretty brutal for her to let your own brother die, so she could live on, spotless and untainted, even sickening, telling Emma that it's time to give up, asking if she doesn't agree. We then see Emma with a bunch of chains around her, as Shade tells her to surrender herself to her. She then goes right to her ear and whispers to her, saying that she worked so hard to get here, telling her that it's just too bad, continuing and saying that because of her, the tower and her friends will all be obliterated, and we then see Emma shedding a tear as she hears that. With that, we get back to real time, where we see Will thinking that he can smell the Belladors from here, explaining that he has no doubt in his mind that she's the one who's been making Emma gather those flowers. We then move to Lihana, who screams out. She says that puppet spells are a forbidden school of magic. All of its practitioners were supposed to be executed. Shade just gets super close to Emma and says that she then guesses that they missed one, explaining that you can't kill what you can't catch, and telling Lihana that she thought that she was the smart one, calling her a little Miss Knight, and all of that combined just makes Lihana look super annoyed. But just then, Will gets out his sword. He speaks out and says that he will ask her straight, asking Shade if she is part of Gotia and what she wants. Also, while he is at it, he asks her how she got into the tower. Shade just looks at him and tells him that she likes his guts and calls him Blady Boy. Shade continues and says that she can tell that he has got so much running through his head, but he is not going to let that get in the way of dragging any bit of dirt he can out of her. Shade isn't anywhere close to stopping, as she explains that Will's thoughts go like this. Could there be others around? Could there be more puppets? Could this be a trap? Shade then starts to lick Emma's neck as she says that Will may have all the questions, but no answers. We see how Lihana is getting more and more annoyed by this. Meanwhile, Shade starts to walk forward. She wipes herself around the mouth and tells them not to let her stop them from asking more questions and encourages them to keep digging, telling them to let their familiar keep sniffing around and let's see who can outsmart whom. With that, we also see Kiki being a bit shocked, but we then move into Will's head. He thinks that it appears this crafty, conceited, and seemingly unassailable mage has got him all figured out. He continues and thinks that he is sensing a similar energy to Headless and Mars. He then looks right at Shade and calls it something sinister and wicked, thinking that they could be dealing with a remnant of Gothia, so that must strike with everything that they have got. Shade then speaks up and asks if they are ready, telling them that they sure are. With that, we see Will and Lihana both looking more fired up than ever. While Shade looks manic with Emma behind her, Shade tells them to come on and to get this tag team match started. With that, we see Emma starting with a Verdis Lana attack and shooting a beam of dark magic. Lihana seems to be shocked by this, as she says that it's a black wind spell. Will adds that her body's being influenced by the puppet magic and that he is sure of it, explaining that it's a dark magic spell. He thinks that it was most definitely the spell that killed Julius, wondering if this is how Emma became a puppet, by having her own mind magic amalgamated with this mage's dark magic. Anyway, Lihana then charges forward and she screams at Will to help Emma, and he says that he is on it. However, we then see Shade, who starts to say some weird stuff, but not long after, she gets onto the ground and says, Berzame Sike Mavalus Kadzul. And with that, we head to both Lihana and Will, and see that some sort of chain has appeared right around them. Both of them are equally shocked, as they think that these chains just came out of their shadows. We then see Will just stopping fully, and Lihana, who is now on the wall, thinks that she can't even attack. She has never seen magic like this before, thinking that it has to be some kind of esoteric technique. With that, we cut back to Shade, who tells them that people in the tower really make her mad, saying that they go around all high and mighty, always so sure that their way is the right one. But still, they are not even conceited mages of the tower who can erase their own shadows. Shade tells them to continue and dance with the very Shade that stalks their every move. After that, Shade looks to her left, where Lihana is running with all that she can. Shade screams at her and calls her quick. She explains that this spell usually runs right through mages who have never seen it before, but those thunder rats are a real pain in her chains. But even then we can see a small piece of the chain scratching Lihana's face and making her feel a bit of pain. But not long after she starts to get out some magic circles around her, and then while she is still running, she uses her Thaddeus Leo attack, which seems to send thunder attacks right at Shade. However, Shade isn't worried in the slightest, as she just calls out to Emma. Then in almost a nanosecond, we see Emma, who is now standing in front of Shade, and she uses her Zephyros Claw, which manages to deflect Lihana's attack. Will says that Shade is using her as a shield, and Lihana calls her a wretched fiend. We then move back to Shade, who asks them if this isn't pretty handy, explaining that she doesn't have to worry one bit about using her own energy with puppet magic, unlike those piddling guardians. She then is right by Emma's neck, as she tells Will and Lihana that she has got her own courageous puppet willing to sacrifice her life to protect her precious master. After that, we see Shade shooting some dark attacks right at Will, but he seems to be able to evade them with ease. While we are here, we also get into his head. He thinks that Emma's not a guardian. Because of that, he can forget about trying to aim for a core as a way to stop her, and she moves to protect Shade as if it were her own choice. He continues and explains that this doesn't bode well for them, but even then, he thinks that he has learned something. He looks closely at them and thinks that the chains coming from that mage's wand are what's controlling her. But just then, when he is in his thoughts, Shade suddenly says, "Boom!" And we then see Lihana's and Will's eyes reacting super quickly. Because in the next panel we can see a big explosion with dark magic. But even then, it looks like Will and Lihana managed to get out of it unscratched. Lihana speaks out and says that Will was right. As esoteric as this magic is, for some reason, Shade hasn't used any puppet spells against them. Will says that it's true, and that they're likely finished if they turned into puppets. Will then starts to look super determined, as he says that the fact that they haven't yet tells him that it means for casting such a spell are complicated. He doubts that they will be turning for as long as this engagement continues. After that, it's Shade's turn to speak, and she asks them what the matter is, asking if the show is over already. We then get a close-up of her as she calls out to Emma. She tells her to summon her guardians, explaining that they will encircle them with help from her shadows. With that, in the next panel, we see a bunch of guardians in the air. Lihana is about to say something, but before she can finish, Will tells her not to worry. He has a smile on himself as he looks at Lihana and tells her that he can keep up with the speed of thunder. Lihana just starts to smile as she then tells Will that she has been meaning to tell him. However, she thinks that they make an amazing team. Will adds on that he thinks the same thing and they just look so awesome. But after that, we see them getting ready as Lihana puts her shoe down to the ground and says, "Owen Sike, li sol de dua." After that, a bunch of thunder starts to appear around her. She then looks over to Will and tells him to take it. With that, Will puts out his sword right to her wand, and the two of them then link up together. We then see Will's eyes, which are filled with a fire as he says, "Primed." Dualis Wis. And this is just pure cinema, like for real. Because in the next panel, we can see both Liana and Will going right past Shade and Emma and destroying all of their guardians. We even see on Shade's facial expression that she is super shocked. She then looks back at them and wonders just what that was. However, she sees that Liana and Will are going in for another attack as Lihana says, "Patracior," which seems to send a thunder attack right at Shade. But Shade acts quickly as she calls out to Emma, who uses Gallius Whis, which seems to create some sort of shield around them, blocking the attack. But even then, Shade is beginning to panic a bit. She wonders how in the world they are faster than the other Thunder people. She then screams out and tells her chains to capture them. However, it's useless, as we see, Lihana just outran the chains, and Shade knows that, as she thinks that she can't get to either of them in time. However, she then explains that it should be the least of her worries as we see Lihana cutting through her chains, and with that, Shade thinks that she can't even nab them if she doesn't have any chains left. But just under that, we see Will becoming a rocket as he goes right ahead. While he is charging forward, he looks at Lihana and thinks that he knows exactly what Lihana wants to do. Lihana looks back at him and thinks that she can see the determination on Will's face. With that, both of them get right to Shade and basically surrender her, while thinking that as frontline fighters, they move in complete harmony. After that, we see Will cutting loose the chain that was binding with Emma. This annoys Shade a lot. However, she can't even do anything, as she has Lihana right in front of her. She holds her wand right at Shade and tells her that she is finished. Shade is just silent, but Lihana continues. She says that Emma's been broken from her influence as we now see that Will is with her. But that's far from all, as just then we see a ton more mages being around them. We then see Lunais and Horua. They speak up and explain that they brought backup just like they were told. The other one then asks if this is the mage that killed Julius. Will then speaks up and explains that he had both Lunais and Jorua gather reinforcements and told them to quietly surround the mage controlling Emma. Once the fight began, we then get back to Lihana, who tells Shade that she no longer will hold Emma hostage. Shade doesn't look that worried, however, as she asks if it was all a ruse to buy time, calling them clever rats. Lihana then continues and tells her that she will tell them everything she knows, from within a holding cell, of course. Shade, however, just starts to look kind of manic, as she begins to laugh uncontrollably. Lihana gets surprised and asks her what she is laughing at. Shade then begins to get out a ton of magic circles and asks what else she could be laughing about, but their absolute stupidity. With that, we see Will's and Lihana's eyes go directly to Shade, but before anything else happens, the entire area that they are within gets filled with a dark mist. Lihana asks what just happened, but Will looks certain as he explains that the other mages are under the influence of puppet magic. Lihana is shocked and asks why, explaining that they haven't even been caught by the chains. But don't you worry, as our little friend Shade will explain everything. She tells them that they thought that the chains were the tricks to this, saying that they model students are as adorable as they are moronic. Now Shade didn't seem to give us any hints, but it's fine, as Will and Lihana seem to have figured it out. Lihana thinks that the heavy scent of the Belladors must be it. Will adds on that the chains aren't the key to puppet magic, but instead it's the scent. With that, Lihana then screams out. She says that she doesn't understand. How could this be possible? Those mages just arrived on the scene, so when were they influenced? However, Shade looks crazier than ever as she tells them that she has been working on this way before they all came to the tower, explaining that she spent so much time gathering puppets. Now she has her own wonderful collection of obedient minions, telling them straight up that the traitors among them stand before them already, but still it's too late for them to do anything about it. With that, we see all of the mages firing right at Lihana and Will, and while that goes on, Shade announces that with her magic, she will crush the tower down to its very foundation. After that, we move to Will, who has Emma behind him, and he's trying his best to deflect the attacks that are heading right to him. With this all in mind, he knows that he very well can't move from this spot since he has Emma behind him. But while Will is doing everything in his power to protect Emma, she suddenly starts to get up behind him. Will looks back and calls out to her, but Emma starts to slowly raise her wand, telling Will to just please run, as we can see her trying her absolute hardest to fight back against the magic. Will knows that he is in an extremely tricky situation, but he decides to use all of his power to deflect the attack from the other high mages. After that, he grabs a hold of Emma and pushes her down to the ground to make her and him avoid the attack. But even then, we see Emma's wand starting to emanate a dark spell of her own, and in the next panel, she completely fires it off right at Will, making a huge explosion. We see Will, who flies right past Lihana right into a building. Lihana looks back in pure shock as she can hardly say his name. Meanwhile, Shade just laughs a ton, explaining that Will got blasted into a building by the very puppet he was trying to protect. She then starts going more and more manic as she calls Will a maniac. Meanwhile, Lihana's face is filled with despair as she calls out to Will, who we can then see is sitting right in the wall without moving a single muscle. Lihana then continues to shout out to Will, and while that's a nice thing to do, she should have been more worried about herself, as we see a ton of chains appearing around her, and then in the next panel she is completely stuck and unable to move. In her head, she thinks that she can feel her magic energy being siphoned off. She continues as she explains that her strength is slipping away. We then get back to Shade, who tells them that those rats put up a good fight. However, she then starts to look manic as she tells them that it looks like she is the one who outsmarted them, and on top of that, she didn't even need any help to do it. But as she says that, we see the mysterious man getting ready to intercept, but before he can, Finn comes before him and tells him to hold it right there. The man is shocked, but Finn tells him that things are just starting to get good. He then gets close to the man, as he tells him that if he interrupts in any way, then he will make sure it's the last thing he ever does, and we can then see the man, who is just silent. After that, we go back to Shade, who says that it's time to wrap this up, telling them that she was kinda annoyed when they saddled her with the job of bringing them back as a puppet while destroying that infernal tower, but that was one incredible show Will managed to put on. She then starts to retract her chains, while telling them that making puppet spell work is a real pain. Gotta do a lot of digging in a would-be puppet's memory to find a proper patch of trauma to hook her chains into. Can't control them otherwise after all. Shade then just walks past Lihana as she tells her not to worry, telling her that she will take care of her when she is good and ready. Explaining that she just need to hang tight for now. She can watch as she ruins this boy and make him hers. But after that, she says that it reminds her, telling them that the way Emma fell was hilarious. Snot poured out of her nose as she cried, screaming for her to stop. This we can see is making Lihana pretty annoyed. But Shade then explains that she is going back to business, and to let's see what memories plague Blady Boy. Lihana then screams at Will to wake up and to open his eyes, but it's useless. She then tells herself to move, but once again that is just as useless. Anyway, Shade says dive, burrow, control, Burzim seek, and Mavelous holler, and with that, a bunch of magic circles start to appear right around Will. We then cut to Shade being in his memories. She starts to look around and thinks that she has managed to enter his mind. But what's up with this kid's memories? She is seeing a lot of dark spots, Her memory's got to be shot. She then starts to walk forward as she says it's whatever. All she needs is one bit of juicy trauma, but just then, she starts to look surprised as, out of nowhere, a bunch of lightning-like weapons start going right to her. We then see Shade being pinned down in a super uncomfortable position as she then screams out. She starts to look worried as she wonders what it is that is going on, thinking that this has never happened before, but just then she starts to see flower petals around her, and when she looks forward, she can see this crazy witch woman again. We get a close-up of her eyes, which look like stars, as she then tells Shade to begone. With that, she takes her wand and sends a dark beam attack right at her. Shade starts to panic as she screams no again and again, but just then, it looks like she is coming back to reality, but even then she is questioning what is going on. We then see Will holding onto her neck, and she wonders when he broke away from her chains. We see Will, who starts to look really scary, and Shade questions if he repelled her magic, but she then says that he didn't. While holding it around her neck, she says that Will managed to eat her spell. We then see Will, and he looks colder than ever. He also has the same symbol on his eye as the crazy woman. Anyway, Shade thinks that this is insane, and wonders what kind of beast is hiding inside of him. Shade then starts to sweat as she asks Will what he is, and just then, she knows that she has to do something, so she takes her wand and uses some spell on Will's arm, which breaks her loose. Shade is then down on the ground again, but as she looks up, she just gets more and more amazed as she sees Will breaking her chain. And guys, seriously, what is going on? Will is so insanely cool, like this chapter is so sick. Anyway, Will then gets down on the ground. After that, he looks right at Shade while he starts to speak some sort of ancient language. Just then, some sort of dark blade starts to form in his hand, and he then says loudly, "Burst summon Melgitor." With that, we then see his star eye becoming a lot bigger, if you can say that, and after that, he sends his strike throughout the entire city, and just look at the pure amount of damage it is able to create, like it's going past so many houses and buildings. Right after that, we see Lehana, who looks at this extremely shocked, but just after that, we see Will starting to fall right down to the ground. Meanwhile, Shade somehow looks to be pretty unscratched. She wonders what it was that he just did, and not long after she screams out and asks him who he is, but since he is down on the ground, she isn't getting much of an answer. But with that, we move to Lehana, who notices something. She says that Will's attack helped loosen the chains. She tells her to come on and do something, telling herself that thunder must be swift. It must stand for its oath. She is relentless, she is indomitable, she is a knight of thunder, and she will never surrender. And with that, we can see that she managed to break free. Just then, she uses her Lisol de Dua, Argus ability to get right to Shade. Shade sees her but notices her way too late, so Lehana manages to slash her with her thunder. She then tries to go in for a second attack, but Shade then managed to get some distance, and after that she uses her wand to make an ability called Nost. Now this ability creates a huge black mist around them. This makes it so that Lehana is unable to do anything. And while that goes on, Shade uses this to her advantage to flee up to a rooftop. As she is running, she curses them out, explaining that she will make them pay for this. She then smashes her hand into the wall and calls it ridiculous, explaining that it hurts so much, continuing and saying that the next time she sees them, they are surely dead. And we then see her with a pretty big cut. We then get back to Lehana. She wonders if her spell held her off, but she then corrects it and explains that she just ran away. Even then she can't believe it, a supporter of Gohita in the flesh. But then we move to Finn, who says that he was hoping he could get a little more use out of him, but he guesses this is the end of his road for now. He has a smirk as he says that he still has a long way to go before he reaches his origins. But while he says that, we can see the other guy just disappearing into thin air. After that, we move on and go to the 6th stratum, the Fantifirmary. Lehana asks Will if he really can't recall anything that happened. Will tells her that he can't. After Emma cast her spell at him, his mind went blank. He looks at his hand and thinks that he doesn't remember, but he feels like he got a glimpse of something after being hit with that puppet spell, wondering if what he saw could be connected to Whis. But while he is in his thoughts, we see Claire, who goes to them. Will, in an instant, asks her how Emma is doing. Claire just signals them in, and she then explains that her injuries are bad, but her florophagia is worse. The prolonged exposure to Belladors is wreaking havoc on her body. Even with the elven curative spells, it will take a while to treat her, but even then, the good news is that she is alive. Her recovery is in the hands of the elves now. Thanks to the two of them, they were also able to save the other mages who fell victim to the puppet spell. However, they won't be able to move freely for some time, calling it an after effect of the spell. After that, it sure gets silent for a while. Before Lehana speaks up, she calls out to Claire. She tells her that the mage that they were up against used an esoteric school of magic called Berzemi Sikh. asking Claire what she knows about it. Claire thinks for a bit before explaining that the Berzims were a clan of puppet magic specialists who attempted to take control of the western city of Taralis. As she is sure they are aware, they were summarily executed for plunging the city into chaos, but their use of Belladors as a reagent for their magic is news to her, explaining that if what they say is true, then there are likely more puppets in the tower than they know. She tells them to be on their toes if they smell Belladors. There's no telling where the enemy could be lurking. Will thinks for a bit before telling Claire that the mage used dark magic, asking if it is possible the traitor is from the dark faction. Claire explains that they can't say for sure just yet. What they can say is that no one by the description the two have given is part of the dark faction. Because of that, the so-called traitor could be hiding out in the tower. Claire is then about to say something else, but she cuts it short as she then tells them that they should talk about something else. She then puts both her hands on their heads as she tells them that she told them to spy, but not to have all-out brawls out in the open. Will and Lihanna then look at her and just apologize, but just then we see Arvin, the Wind faction, and also Monica, the Wind faction adjutant. They barrage in, and Arvin asks Claire if it's true that Emma was attacked. They get to them and ask them if she is okay. Will is about to say something, but just then, we can see that Claire speaks telepathically to both Lihanna and Will. She tells them to not say a single word. She explains that they don't know who's being controlled, and the enemy's eyes and ears could be anywhere. She suspects the wretch will be sending puppets to keep track of the two of them, or perhaps even make an attempt at their lives, telling them not to let their guard down for anyone, and to consider any who approach them as a foe first and friend second. After that, we see Claire as she tells Arvin and Monica that she has been waiting for them. She tells them that she will explain everything and to follow her this way, but before she has fully left, she tells Lihanna and Will to stay close to Zio and Guilford, as they will be safer in their presence. After that, we see Lihanna and Will, who is super shocked. Both of them think that the tower is the very image of order in their world, a symbol they trusted, celebrated, and aspired to be a part of. But now the Upper Institute, the other factions, or even their own Thunder faction comrades may very well be their enemies. They continue as they think that the moment the existence of puppets within the tower comes to light, distrust and vision will set in. The collapse of the tower will be inevitable. After that, Lihanna speaks up and says that this is going to be tough, saying that they can't trust anyone in the tower, but Will tells her that they can. He tells Lihanna not to forget that they still have friends, and this is so sweet. Even Lihanna thinks the same as she looks at him with a smile and says his name. But while they are having fun, we can see Guilford, who appears between them and asks them if they are having fun. They obviously get super surprised and ask him what he is doing here. Guilford tells them that he got a message from Claire asking to come and pick up a couple of slackers in the Fantifirmary. With that, he then starts to look serious as he tells them that he hopes that they are ready and calls them shameful slobs, explaining that they have got a storm of drills headed their way, and this makes both Will and Lihanna just scream out. With that, however, we switch scenes. We see Elfie, who goes into Erin's room and says that she has a question. Elfie looks extremely cool and fired up, just like she always does, as she straight up asks Erin if it's his wish to destroy the tower, and we then see Erin, who just looks right at her while sitting in his throne. We then head to the second stratum and to the Earth faction. Here we see Colette looking inside her room, just thinking about Julius. Outside her room, it's Rose who calls out to her. She tells her that she has been holed up in her room forever now. She knows that she must be hungry, telling her to come out, and that she will treat her to the special meaty soup that she loves so much. But after that, it's just pure silence. Rose starts to look lost and a bit sad, but she then tells Colette that she can't keep blaming herself for what happened to Julius, and as she says that, we see Colette squeezing her hands. She then screams, asking how she can't, explaining that she is the one who called everybody out to the tavern, so who else is there to blame but her, saying that it's all her fault. Rose is then just silent before sitting herself down. She then tells Colette that she sure has changed. She is nothing like the girl she met as a first year. Rose remembers her looking disheveled from her hair to her uniform. She is completely different, as she didn't seem to care about anything. At that time, Rose even thought that she didn't want to talk with her because of it. She continues and says that in those days, Colette had this look in her eyes, like she wanted the whole world, including herself, to fade into nothing. By the way, just a sidetrack, but I can't believe that this was once Colette. Anyway, back to Rose, who says that looking back, she thinks that she can safely admit that she hated who Colette was. However, Rose approached her because her grandpa practically begged her to guide the Loire's only daughter to the tower. But even then, she was scary and creepy. Rose didn't want anything to do with her, much less be her friend, and we can see how much that hurts Colette. But Rose continues as she explains that it all changed after that fateful day. We then see another flashback to this time with Cariot, who looks at a hologram of Colette before he then starts to completely go ham and use his magic and blow up a house. Now this is completely sending me left field, because why would Cariot want to kill Colette when she was a child even? Anyway, he didn't get his wish, as we saw. Will was holding Colette on his back while having a ton of injuries. Rose then says that when Colette became friends with Will, she changed for the better. She learned to treat others and herself with kindness, and she started to smile more, and now she sheds tears over the loss of another. Rose just wants her to know she loves who Colette has become. She then sees Kiki coming by, and she begins to smile. But after that, she tells Colette that she's going to leave her alone for now, telling her that if she's going through a hard time, then she is going to do everything that she can to protect her, as she loves her just that much, telling Colette that she will see her later. However, hearing that makes Colette fly into action as she jumps out of her bed and runs out screaming Rose's name. But as she goes out, she sees Kiki right in her face. Colette gets super scared. Meanwhile, Rose just smiles. She then tells Colette that she has finally shown her face, asking if she thinks that she could be an actress. Colette doesn't mind that, however, as she asks Rose why Kiki is with her. Rose just says that she is guessing this cute thing snuck down from the 4th stratum, with an adorable ribbon wrapped around its neck to boot. Colette then asks if it's a Magimemo. Rose says that she thinks so, and tells Colette to put enough of a specific magic into it, and the message should appear. She explains that it looks like Lihana made it, but she bets the little one's owner is the one who wrote it. She then continues to read it, and she learns about everything from the puppet things from Emma being controlled. After having learned that, she starts to break down and cry. Rose asks her if something is wrong, but Colette just holds the paper close as she says Will's name. She thinks that Will might not be a mage, but his words are like a spell that gives her courage to go on. Rose then starts to smile as she says that Colette is finally back, asking what Will wrote that got her smiling. Colette, however, shakes her head and says that she isn't telling. She then looks determined as she tells Rose that Will and Lihana are doing their best out there, so she had better start pitching in too. After that, she, of course, thanks Rose with a hug and tells her that she loves her as well. Rose just pats her on her back before she gets a smug expression and asks Colette who she loves more, her or Will. But Colette just tells her that she isn't going to answer that silly question. But with that out of the way, they look more ready than ever as they are heading out. But we then cut to Wignall. We see him losing concentration and being annoyed. But just then, Lefia tells him that once again, his concentration escapes him, telling him that he may be tired of hearing this, but allow her to refresh his memory. By joining the elf faction, he is expected to master the illusion of one of their homelands, Alheim, the Forest of Healing, and she then holds up this picture of a very beautiful forest. Filvis then adds in as she says that healing magic is their specialty, continuing and saying that light mages are capable of casting a kind of it, but a majority of Lysances are aggressive and therefore can't wield them reliably. Illusion magic is crucial to anyone hoping to protect their allies when they're hurt. Wignall then actually starts to look fired up as he says, "Of course," and calls out their names. We then head into his thoughts as he thinks that having to spy on his own kind and cast doubt on them is unbelievably frustrating, wondering how he is supposed to concentrate under this pressure, and that letter from Will only adds to his stress, a shadowy mage that uses abhorrent puppet magic, thinking that not only does he need to be conferred about a traitor, but now he has to find out if any elves are being manipulated. However, he then says that in any case he must act with caution until he has proof one way or the other. But just then, while he is in his thoughts, Filvis speaks up and says that he is so talented, yet so wretched. Apparently, 6 years at the academy is worth its weight in dust. Lefia joins in and says that ineptitude is in the blood of the Lysants. They couldn't be more different from those elves, saying that the obtuse mages of the academy have poisoned Wignall, condemned you to a failure's fate, and called it a pity. But as Wignall hears this, it changes everything as he screams out. He looks super determined as he tells them to take it back. He says that failure or not, he will always treasure the people he connected with at the academy. To elves, his time there might seem like a fleeting moment, but to him, it was an era of happiness as precious as 100 years of life. Elves swear upon their intangible nobility, asking why it is so hard to recognize that virtue in others. He continues and says that they aren't the only ones who are dignified, who never stop pushing forward. Even when they fail, they don't fear failure. They don't give up on their dreams. After that, he screams right at them, telling them that they're as worthy of respect as any elf, and he will be damned if he lets them speak ill of them. This just makes Lefia smile as she then calls it wonderful. Wignall, however, seems to be super confused by that, but Lafia tells him that he managed to learn a difficult lesson during his time at the academy. Filvis adds on that it's not to look down on others, a requirement for any insufferable elf hoping to break out of their shell. Wignall then asks if this means that they were just testing him. Lafia tells him that he is spot on. They wanted to discern what kind of ally he is, and Wignall passed with flying colors. He is able to set pride aside and trudge on, as well as stand up to his superiors. Lafia smiles right at him and says that it's an honor to be in the presence of an elf of such fine character. Wignall still is just super confused and out of it, but Filvis then says that if she may be frank, the elven sense of brotherhood and rampant elitism is exhausting for them introverts, asking how great it would be if they could just ditch the pride and get along with everyone. After that, the three of them just sit down for a tea party. Lafia then explains that Eleanor would do herself great service if she acted how she is on the inside, telling Wignall to go and teach her a lesson and show her how frightening the quiet ones can be when you push them too far. Wignall, however, tells them that he doesn't think that he is following her, asking if they think that he can teach her a lesson. But just then, Eleanor smashes in the door. She asks if they are making inroads in taming the disgrace. She hopes Lafia and Filvis get right up as they say that they are. Eleanor then looks at Wignall and tells him that he is looking awfully comfortable and asks if he is enjoying his break, but he is just silent. But we then have Lafia, who just says that they tried to stop him, and this makes Wignall think to himself that one thing's for sure, these two are neither traitors nor puppets. We then head right to the tower and the 5th Stratum Fire faction. Here we see Sion and Cariot having a face-off. Sion starts his incantation. He says, "Arise, flames of your suffering. Recall the fiery drama of the scorched earth." By the way, I like how Cariot is just simply smiling at him. Meanwhile, Sion looks to be furious. Anyway, back to Sion, who says with the flames of their sorrowful loss, he consumes his enemy. With that, some fire starts to appear right around his arm, and he then uses his inflamed Berdelion and sends a fire attack right at Cariot. However, Cariot isn't even moving a finger as we then see that he has a whole beast in front of him, which protects him. The fire attacks go at the beast, but it simply munches them up. This makes Sion really annoyed. Meanwhile, Cariot asks him if he still doesn't get it, telling him that he must look to achieve victory without taking a single step. That is the beast's tenet of being a mage, the ideal one. Cariot, still holding down his smile and probably thinking of this as a walk in the park, tells Sion that bolting to and fro like Zio is meaningless and disgraceful. A true mage is unflappable, as immovable as stone, even in the presence of a swordsman like Will. That is, as long as they prepare an impenetrable defense. We then see Cariot with his super cool lion. Sion, however, just looks at this in total disbelief as he says that it's a black flame lion. It gets into his head as he thinks that the secret spell of the Incendia Barum was passed down by generations of ascendants. It calls forth the strongest guardian magic can conjure, a guardian that will protect its summoner from every kind of attack. With that, we head back to Cariot, who tells Sion that what he wants him to do is summon his own black flame lion to protect himself. And don't worry, it doesn't necessarily have to be as grown as his, but this isn't without any cost, because if Sion fails to do so, then his flames will burn him for all eternity, just casually, then asking Sion if he understands. With that, we see Cariot's lion shooting an insane fire beam right at Sion. Sion gets out his wand right away and screams out, but in the next panel, we just see a huge explosion, and not long after, we see Sion, who flies back and onto the floor. Cariot doesn't ask him how he is or anything, as he just tells Sion that he was handpicked by Cariot himself. Surely he can summon at least a baby lion. Sion, however, is still on the floor more annoyed than ever, as he calls it ridiculous. He then thinks back and calls Will a moronic washout, thinking that he just had to send him an important message right before. Cariot assigns him an absurd challenge, wondering how he is supposed to be careful of puppet magic and the scent of Beldors during this. Will didn't even tell him if he and Lihanna were safe, and what about Colette and the others? While in his thoughts, Cariot speaks up and asks him if he is worried about his schoolmates. This seems to really shock Sion, as he looks stunned, but Cariot just continues and asks if it might be about the traitor, or maybe the puppet magic, telling him that there are plenty of reasons to be anxious when he is playing spy. Sion looks like his whole world has just crumbled as he asks how he knows about all of that, but just then he stops himself. Sion then thinks about Claire and that maybe a mediator telepathically relayed to Cariot the information Lihanna and Will gathered, but that would still be impossible, especially not so soon after they shared it. Besides, the order to spy was made in secret. Not even the Magiavander are supposed to know, so why is it that Cariot seems to know? Sion starts to look even more in awe, but Cariot then once again speaks up and says that how he knows that is indeed a mystery. But Sion can't help but think that Cariot might be the traitor. Cariot just tells him that he guesses that he will have to get stronger if he wants to find out, but he doesn't see how he can be forced to speak by someone who can barely handle this trivial trial. Sion just starts to look fired up as he tells him that it's a challenge accepted. We then get to the Thunder faction, and now this is genuinely crazy, as we see a whole snake-looking beast just casually appearing out of some sort of portal. Everyone seems to just be natural to this. Meanwhile, Will and Lihana are super confused. But we then get to 10 minutes prior. Here we see Guilford. He says that the day they have been waiting for will soon be upon them. The party is at hand. Lihana is lost, but we then see Melia on her side, who says that it's a dungeon expedition. But she then starts to look smug as she tells Lihana not to get her hopes up, saying that it's a far cry from the playground antics she and her school pals were up to at the academy. The party is a real dungeon rush with real stakes. Anyway, back to Guilford, who tells them that to prepare for the day, they will be engaging in rigorous combat training. Whatever they do not fail Zio. Will speaks up and asks if they will be sparring with each other, but Nanaru, on his side, tells him that they will be up against guards, and as we know, Will has a lot of trauma with guards, as he thinks that it will be like the monsters they fought in the first tower. After that, we see Olgano, who speaks up. He tells them that just like the fiend from the Bloom, all they've got to do is unseal the pillar partition, and out comes a beast, just like Zoctonia. Every stratum's got them. Lihana says that faction bases occupy up to the 6th stratum. From 7 onward, you must defeat the guards to continue on. They call these strata the domain of trails. Olgano says that, so she knows about it, explaining that they Owenzauses know their stuff. Anyway, he says that if they manage to take down the guards on each stratum and make it to the top of the tower, they become a candidate for the next Magia Wanderer, an Ascendant. But so far, they have only been able to beat the guards up to the 30th stratum. Will then speaks up and excuses himself, but he asks why the guards come out from the tower. Guilford calls it a wonderfully stupid question, saying that he thought about punishing them for wasting their time, but being the supremely benevolent adjutant that he is, he will give an answer. He says that the guards are the living will of their mage queen. Mercedes, the creator of this very tower, is she who engraved the great summoning magics into the tower that produced the guards on each stratum? That is what he has been told. He continues, and says that the guards are tremendous shields that protect their Magia Vander. They are the obstacles, the walls that stand between every aspiring ascendant and the pinnacle of the tower. Asking Will if that answers his question, Will tells him that it sure does. But after that we head into Lihana's thoughts. She thinks that they are part of the Mage Queen's legacy. But if the tower produces these guards, then how is it any different from a dungeon that produces monsters? Mercedes was a pioneer that mastered every manner of magic, there's no doubt. But is this something a mere mage could create? After that, it's Lihana's turn, as she asks how the magic wand goes to and from the uppermost stratum of the tower. Olgano tells her that they shift there, an ability reserved only for mages registered to the top stratum. It allows them to jump from the bottom to the top, just like that. Along with Zio, Gilfod, and other adjutants, ascendants can also come and go as they please. But after that, Olgano speaks up and says that he has got something to ask them now. He goes right between them and asks them what's with these questions, saying that there's been a lot of weird things happening lately, and he doesn't just mean Terminalia. He thinks it's kind of strange that it's all going down during their generation, asking them what exactly they are digging for, and this we can see is leaving both Will and Lihana super in the spot as they look lost. They think about Claire telling them to not let their guards down for anyone. They wonder if Olgano is investigating them, and if they are under suspicion now. Lihana thinks that she doesn't smell Beldors, so he isn't a puppet, but he could be an assassin. But is it even possible for everyone here to be their enemy? After that, we just see him looking super creepily towards Lihana. We then head into a flashback to Will and Lihana. Lihana asks what their goals are, and Will says that the enemy's goal. At first, he thought the goal this plan was to eliminate the magic wander, to destroy the false sky that is the Great Barrier. They'd have to take the people responsible for creating it out of the picture, Elfie and the other Magia Vander, but the domain of trails is the obstacle preventing them from achieving that, naturally. Elfie and the Magia Vander are usually at the top of the tower. Around this time, they come down to watch the new entrants into each faction. Lihana tells Will that she understands. Staying up these nights is more than enough to prevent an attempt at their lives. They wouldn't be able to see the Wand of Light, much less interact with them, saying that not even the strongest puppet mage could put a mage in the position to kill a Magia Vander. That's an issue that goes beyond fighting. Will then joins in and explains that the mage that they fought said she couldn't turn anyone more powerful than her into a puppet. That would mean the factions are full of mages that can't be controlled. Magia Vander, of course, but also Guilford and other adjutants, as well as faction staff. Lihana says that it's right. If what Shade said is true, then that means Gohita has no way of accessing the top of the tower. Will tells her that if the so-called traitor is one of the Magia Vander or an ascendant, that would be a different story. Lihana just explains that she would rather not think about the worst-case scenario, but she starts to wonder how the Terminalia incident factors into all of this. Will tells her that this time, he gets the sense that the enemy's objective is fundamentally different from the events at Terminalia. Lihana then thinks that Shade said she wanted to crush the tower, wondering if that is somewhat different from destroying the barrier. We then get to real time, where they think that all that discussion, and they still couldn't pin down their true objective. Still, no matter how many puppets that mage acquires, they think her chances of assassinating the Magia Vander are extremely slim, thinking that perhaps they are not after the Magia Vander, but something else entirely. But just then, Guilford cuts them out of their thoughts as he screams out. He tells them to let's see how they all cooperate with the newest maggots to their faction, telling them to show them some teamwork, and we then see that snake-looking creature again. Nanaru just says that it's the guard of the 4th stratum, Zoctonia Asla. Melia adds on that it's a mouthful, so they just call it Asla for short, but with that, they start to go right at it. But just then, we cut scenes entirely, as we just see Zio being right by Will as he starts to take out his fist, and tells Will that he was too slow. After that, he, with no hesitation, sends a punch filled with thunder right into Will's chest, and we can even see how shocked Will looks in his eyes before he then flies away. This seems to make Zio super mad, as he is visibly annoyed and tells him that he is slacking off more than usual, asking Will, "What's the matter with him?" Will just gets up and apologizes, but then in his head, he thinks that these one-on-one sessions with Zio are insane. They have been through a ton already, but Will still can't land a single hit on him. He puts his sword in the ground as he thinks that he's way too fast and strong, but even then, Zio is right. His mind is elsewhere. He is fighting to stay focused, but still, he can't help it, as he just knows that someone is watching them, and whoever it is, they used a peculiar hide spell, one that allowed them to conceal themselves from Lihana's search spell and Kiki's nose. Wondering if they are agents of Gothia, could they be on alert because they are close to uncovering the truth about everything? Will then looks right at Zio and continues to think, explaining that whoever it is, he doesn't feel their eyes on him now. Could it be because they are afraid of Zio, or maybe just because they have collaborators on the inside too? Will starts to look worried as he wonders if it is right for them to just exclude Zio from their investigation efforts. He isn't sure about anything anymore. Where is he supposed to be drawing the line? He's going to be frozen here forever if he doesn't stop thinking. But just then, a thunderstrike comes right by him, and then in an instant, it's Zio who is right next to Will's face, almost close enough to kiss him. Anyway, Zio is mad as he tells Will whatever's going on in his head that isn't about him in this fight, telling him to get rid of it now, looking Will right in his eyes as he tells him that Zio is his enemy and that he is fighting him and no one else. After that, in the next panel, Zio just throws Will back on the ground. He tells Will that he has got a bad habit of overthinking, telling him that he needs to stop acting like he is a superior intellectual. Zio then starts to look manic as he asks Will if he knows what he is, telling Will that he is like Zio, he is a taker. This seems to shock Will, however, Zio continues, as he says that he takes from his allies and from his enemies. He takes, and after he is done taking, he takes again. Explaining that this is what he does with that sword of his. Will is even more lost and confused now. But Zio continues as he tells Will that he will take it until he can't take anymore and destroy whatever beast stands in his way. That is the path he is on. When it's all over, once he has taken everything, then Zio is going to take him, and honestly, that sounds a bit weird, but also so cool at the same time. We then see Zio standing in front of Will, who looks super menacing, as Will thinks that Zio's enjoying this. He takes pleasure in combat, and he admires strength with his entire being. With that, Will thinks that he can't be his enemy, and that he exists on a completely different level. After that, Will finally gets up and tells Zio that he has something to tell him. After that, it looks like we skip over Will explaining everything, as instead we see Zio saying that those Gotia people are using puppets to do their dirty work now. He can then be seen playing with his staff, as he tells Will that he hasn't heard anything about that from Whitebeard. Will then thinks that it seems even some of the Magia Vander are out of the loop. He starts to look fierce as he wonders if Aaron and Kreslus are suspicious of the Magia Vander too. Anyway, Zio continues as he says that to tell Will the truth. He couldn't care less about all this spying Will and his pals are up to. He then catches his staff and aura farms like usual. before he looks intense as he says that if Will wants to know what those scumbags are after, then he might be able to help. Will gets super excited as he is first shocked, but asks if he can please tell him. However, Zio right away tells him no. He tells Will that if he wants it, then he will need to come and take it. He tells Will that if he lands one hit on Zio, then he will give him the info he wants. Telling Will to throw aside every useless thought in his head and fight him right now, he screams at Will to show him just how powerful he really is, how they are kin, admirers of might, one and the same, telling him to really come on. This seems to make Will's eyes light up before he then explains that it feels like it has been ages, but this isn't the first time this has happened to him, and he then thinks back to Edward. He then continues saying that again. He finds himself in front of an immovable pillar of strength, like he always does. The last time he was ridden with fear and tortured by misery, but now he feels thankful. He can see what lies beyond this pillar. With that, he looks serious as he takes on his goggles and explains that just past this obstacle is the strength to protect, and he will make it his. With that, he takes out his sword and says, "Prime Pathos, Dual Whist Reloaded," and he looks extremely dope. But it's not just him, as Zio looks equally as fired up as he tells him to come on. With that, both of them start to take the first step, and they are going at each other at a rapid pace. Their clash even makes a super huge explosion happen, but we then see them side by side, which is super insane. Will versus Amagia Vander is just pure cinema. Will, in his head, thinks that Lihana's esoteric magic is doing just enough to take the bite out of Zio's Wrathbolt, and he thinks that he can work with this. But just then, we see Zio creating a thunder beam with his finger. But even then, Will manages to read it and jumps over it. He is then above Zio, and thinks that he has already seen that one. But is he even above Zio anymore? As in the next panel, we see him right behind Will. Will starts to get worried as he thinks that this is a new one. And after that, Zio starts to send a ton of rapid thunder attacks right down at Will. Will then thinks that Zio's fighting style doesn't adhere to a pattern because there isn't one. He darts around like lightning, outlining a new path with every movement. He never attacks the same way twice. Zio fights with his own unique tactics like a wild beast. Because of this, Will explains that he can't figure him out, wondering what Zio will do next. But we then see what he is going to do next, as Zio is upside down in the air. He uses his Zalja Saga and sends a pretty big thunder attack right at Will. Will seems to have managed to put his sword in front of it, minimizing the damage a bit. While this is going on, we see Finn. He says that every condition has fallen into place. The question is, will he notice? Will he heed the call to expand the power of his Prime Pathos? And we then see Will looking like he took a fair bit of damage. But we then head right into Will's head. He thinks that he is up against Amagia Vander. There's only one way he could possibly best someone so unimaginably powerful. After that, the forest that was behind him looks like it turns to water. Will then thinks about the power Finn helped him achieve, wondering if he can do that, but we then cut to Finn, who says that he can't. In this moment, he has yet to fulfill the conditions required to access the fifth source. After that, Will thinks about the magic Lihana said he used, if he could just maybe do that again. But we then see this crazy lady again, who tells Will that he can't, not before he has traced his origins. This leaves Will pretty stuck. He wonders what is going to happen now. He thinks that he has power, but that he can't use it right now, wondering what he is supposed to do, and it then looks like he is inside the water now. But as he's going deeper and deeper into the water, he surprisingly goes into Elfie's arms, which catches him. Will is understandably shocked as he says Elfie's name with a shocked tone. Elfie goes right by his ear and tells him that she knows what it took for him to get here. But as he then tries to look at her, she suddenly disappears. Will starts to look around more and more, but he then sees a book in the water. As he goes to it, a ton of pages start to open up with a lot of his different moments. He looks at them all, taking in just what he has done to get here, just as Elfie said. With that, he finally asks himself what he is doing. He explains that no matter how great or unfamiliar a power, he will not let himself be led astray. He will stand up to his opponent and to himself. He has always given everything he has to protect the people he cares for and to follow his dream. He fought to get here, and he will continue to fight. After that, he heads to the two powers he mentioned before, but this time, he puts them aside and says that awakening will be damned. With that, he tells himself to think back on the story he has woven with his friends, of all the people who helped him get to where he is now, how he turned knowledge into wisdom, uncovered the unknown, and transformed thoughts and emotions into strength. He has accomplished it all, but even then, it's only just the beginning. After that, he suddenly sees Lihana and tells himself to open his book to the right pages. He then goes to Lihana, and the two of them shake hands. While they are holding hands, Lihana's hand suddenly starts to turn into a sword, and Will drags it out. After that, with his sword in his hand, he starts to speed up, once again going through his memories as he tells himself to read his memories and then bring them together. After that, he has Elfie behind him and Julius in front of him. He tells them to stand with him, thinking that he must reach deep into his history to retrieve every magical memory he has made. And after that, he has to bring them back to life. We then cut to Zio, who soars through the sky and says that it's another day and another victory. He then goes to where Will landed, and it's a ton of smoke right around there. But suddenly, a sword starts to peek out, and we then see Will looking super fired up as he says, "Prime Pathos, revived." After that, he has both Elfie and Julius behind him as he says, "Glace was tactical reload." Zio, who is going right at him, wonders if he just changed the affinity of his blade from thunder to ice. But suddenly he starts to look shocked, as he thinks that there is something more to this. Will, however, looks filled with determination, and Zio is right by him. But then in the next panel, we see a whole thing appear, and it was Will's Iceplosion ability. But it did seem that Zio managed to evade it. But even then, as he is in the air, he just laughs, saying that Will has got some tricks in his sleeves. We then head back to Finn, who says that the sheer speed of his Wrath Bolt style might have saved him, but he won't be so lucky next time, explaining that the tactical reload isn't just a simple realignment of his sword's affinity, as instead it's far more than that. We then see some lighting around Will's shoes, while he has ice around him, but after that he says Prime Pathos revived, and with that he starts to speed up right at Zio. Zio takes out his own staff as he says that this is finally fun, but we then see Will behind Zio, and Finn continues his thought as he says that it allows Will to shuffle between multiple elements on a whim, even in the heat of battle. With that, Will says, "Dualis Vis, Argus," and with that, he takes his sword right at Zio, who seems to be having to block it with his hand. But even then, this panel is just so insanely cool. Anyway, the sheer force from Will pushes Zio back towards the ground, and Will looks to be having the advantage right now. But we then get to Zio, who is holding onto Will's sword, telling him to color him shocked. Meanwhile, we have Will, who just laughs a bit while looking exhausted, but under him, we have Zio, who has a big smile on his face. After that, Zio throws Will onto the ground. Will gets up and thinks that priming his sword over and over again took everything out of him. He can barely move a muscle, but he wonders if he maybe did it. And we then see Zio holding out his hand with a cut in it from the sword and a ton of blood around it. Zio tells Will well played and that he finally got one on him. Will looks pretty surprised, but still happy. But then, once again, we head to Finn, who calls Cauldron a wicked witch, explaining that it's all happening just as she planned. But he supposes that when you are taught to find the solutions to problems on your own, this is what you get, an explosive combination of wand and sword. Anyway, back to Zio, who says that he is a man of his word, and with that, he tells Will to listen up. He explains that the Gohita goons are after the key to the heavens, Baal. Will is just super confused, but Zio tells him that it's the key to destroying the Great Barrier, and that it's sealed away at the very top of the tower. Will then gets into his head as he thinks that there's a key to destroying the Great Barrier, and it's kept at the apex of the tower. That would mean Elfie and the other Magiavander are protecting it, but he then thinks that he is getting ahead of himself. He thinks about Shade, and says that now that they know what Gotia is after, they don't want to kill the Magiavander. Their goal is to capture Baal. If the tower is the only thing keeping Baal secure, the destruction of the tower would be tantamount to the collapse of the Great Barrier. He knows that this is it. The pieces of this puzzle have finally come together. He then gets a slight smirk as he says that they just have to figure out how they're planning to destroy the tower. Colette and the others should be able to help with that. But while he is in his head, Zio speaks up. He tells Will that before he gets any funny ideas, he reminds him that they will be taking them on a dungeon expedition in a few days. Will is super confused, but Zio continues and tells Will that he landed a hit on him. With Will and Liana on their squad, they might be able to make some real progress. He looks determined and says that this time they are shooting for the 50th floor. They are going to crush Whitebeard's record, and Will is going to help them do this. Will, in his head, thinks that after everything he told him, Zio is still taking them on an expedition. Will then gets up and runs to Zio. He tells him that he can't be serious. Puppets could be lurking anywhere in the tower. It's a ticking time bomb, and the enemy will take advantage of their absence as soon as they leave. He is sure of it, but before Will can go any further, a thunder beam strikes a tree right next to him. This makes Will nervous, and he comes back to reality. Zio then tells Will that if the tower can't handle them being gone, then they don't need it. Telling Will to imagine if all it takes is a band of scumbags to bring this place to its knees, it would never stand a chance against the celestial hosts. Explaining that they need power to destroy the hosts, and there's no faster way to obtain power than by going on expeditions. Telling Will that it's happening and that he needs to be ready. With that, we then see Will being conflicted, left behind. After that, we see a cup flying across a room. It gets on the floor, and someone screams, calling them meddling brats, and saying that the next time they see them, their heads are theirs. And we then learn that it's Shade who said it. After that, another one says that the so-called sword wielder is now under the protection of the Wand of Thunder, continuing as they say that the Owenzouses and Guilford are on high alert and seem to have tightened their security. He is almost certain that Kreslos is behind this development. As it stands, they can't even manage to capture the boy as instructed by Headless, let alone manage to kill him, saying that it appears the tower is well aware of the puppet magic that roams its floors, but now that they know the fools in the Thunder faction are leaving on an expedition, a new opportunity has presented itself, telling Shade that they will carry out the plan as soon as they depart. Shade doesn't even let this guy finish their sentence as they scream out, telling them to shut up and that she already knows what to do, explaining that her puppets will make quick work of that stupid domain of trails, looking super fierce as she says that she will hit them right where it hurts, saying that the secrets of the Collis panel will be hers. After that, we cut to Kreutz and Charles. They ask someone called Tony Harvey what they are doing here. Tony looks back and is surprised, explaining that they just got lost and wandered into this odd place. But Kreutz cuts him off before he is done, telling him that it's enough of his babbling and calls him a puppet. Then in the next panel, we can see Charles using his wand to take Tony down. Kreutz continues and tells Tony that they can smell the Belladors on him. Charles thinks that he can't believe they managed to infiltrate this far. The tower's control system is but a stone's away. Suddenly, he starts to look shocked, as in his head, he wonders if they could be after the Collis control panel, explaining that this is the heart of Mercedes Collis. If the enemy overwhelms them here, they will have the tower in the palm of their hand. They could lose control over everything. The gates, the domain of trails, even the gods of each stratum. The moment they emerge from their seals, order would be all but lost. Charles then speaks up and asks Kreutz if they have a plan against this, saying that the traitor that infiltrated the tower is part of the group that attacked Terminalia. He is almost certain they will try and use that mage killer again, telling Kreutz that they need to deploy their anti-mage killer gear quickly, asking if it's finished and that the factions are begging for them to get it done. Kreutz just takes up his glasses and says that it's still in the testing phase, certainly not ready to put in the hands of the war-crazed faction. It then seems like we head into Kreutz's head as he says that he doesn't smell Belladors on Charles, and the super advanced traitor tracker that he developed is mum. If he meant ill or was plotting to betray him, his tracker would have picked up on it, simple as it is. His deputy is clean, but if Kreslouis' intel is to be believed, then the only person he could trust is himself. Best to assume that everyone who approaches him is hostile. Until the situation changes, he shall trust no one. We then get to Charles again, who thinks that it is probably what Kreutz is thinking, so I'm guessing that what we just read was Charles's thoughts and not Kreutz's. We then head to the second stratum and the Dark Faction headquarters. Mike is super surprised and asks if one of their senior faction members was captured in the upper institution, asking someone called Angie if they are serious. We then see Angie, who tells him that apparently he doesn't remember how he got there or anything else for that matter. Mike says that it's because they were probably turned into a puppet, saying that Will's message said they've infiltrated every faction. He continues and says that this is bad news. What if they're looking for the mages who've been told to spy? Suddenly, out of nowhere, someone called Morta comes by and jumps on top of Mike and asks them what they are talking about. Mike is super caught off guard, but thinks that he only knows a few things about her. She's older than them, and she always has low blood pressure. But the question is it safe to talk to her? After that, Mike starts to hold on to her, and he is about to tell her everything, but just then, Angie grabs his hand and tells him that they need to go and buy snacks. Mike is super confused, but Angie continues to just drag him away, and Mike then tells Morta that he will talk to her later, but we then see Morta, who starts to get a blank expression. She says that puppet and spy were all she needed from her, explaining that Shade was right. Every one of these new mages is a mole. She puts on her mask and explains that she will report this to Walther later, saying that this is so annoying and that killing them would be easy, but they'd be much more useful as Shade's puppets. After that, we head to the Ice faction. Here we see someone called Mimily. She asks both Lunais and Jahora if Emma was really under control. They say that she was, and that they don't think they can ever forgive her for killing Julius. But the feelings they have for the evil mage that made her do it go beyond hate. They then start to look really serious as they say that they will get revenge for Julius, even if it's the last thing they do. Mimily just starts to look annoyed. She thinks that these boys are even weaker than Julius was, and they want revenge, calling it hopeless. She then starts to walk away and thinks that Julius is gone, and the only peers she has left in this forsaken faction are both of them, guessing that she is the only one taking this spy thing seriously, explaining that these boys make her feel sick. She continues and says that she just wants to go home. She would have been around her adorable little sisters and snuggled with them all day long. She would have never become a high mage if she knew she would be doing this, wondering if it is too much to ask for even the leader of this faction to be a leader for once. As one of their comrades was killed, she didn't seem to want to do anything about it. Just then, someone knocks on the door. Mimily opens it, and the guy says that the package is here for the Ice faction. Mimily looks at their colorless mage, asking if they are an artificer. She then continues and asks how they managed to get in here and what's in their package. But just then, he holds out something. Explaining that they are protective charms, he was instructed to deliver them by Elfie herself. Mimily looks at it and sees that it's her signature. After that, we see that it's the goat Rosti who is back finally. He looks super cool as he tells Mimily to pass it out to the other faction members and try to keep it on the down low. Anyway, having Rosti finally back is a true blessing. After that, we get to the Wind faction. We see someone called Terry saying that he heard that there was another mage from their faction that might be a puppet. Apparently, one of the colorless mages captured them. Callan says that then Emma wasn't the only one. The entire faction has been compromised, and the impact's only spreading. After that, they start to wonder if the traitor could be someone in their faction. But just then, they start to freeze as they hear the Wind faction chef Arvin comes by and asks them what the fuss is all about, telling them that they look awfully troubled. Arvin continues and tells them that whatever's bothering them, they are welcome to discuss it with him. He is quite the whiz at solving problems. After that, he just smiles at them before thanking them, but saying that they should be fine, and then telling them goodbye. We then see Arvin going into a room, and as he enters, he kind of starts to break down. He gets on the ground and says that yet again, the feckless shepherd fails to comfort his anxious flock, asking why he is so useless. He calls himself a fool, unworthy of his own title, and the worst mage of all time. But just then, someone called Monica comes to him. Arvin, in an instant, goes right to her and hugs her. He tells her that he can't do this anymore, that he quits, and that he can never be like Garzella. Monica just tells him that he can't do it with this attitude, telling him that he may be only pretending to be a leader, but that doesn't mean that he hasn't been trying his absolute best to make it work. Arvin then looks at her and begs her for some candy, telling her that he can't think without it. Monica, however, tells him no, not yet at least. She continues and asks him to wait a little longer, telling him that he will be fine and that she knows that he can do it, and she sure seems a bit strange. Anyway, we then cut to Lihana and Will, and Lihana asks Will what they are supposed to do now, telling him that letting this sit would only be putting the tower in danger. Will, however, assures her that he has a plan. We then cut to Finn, who is back on the roof. He says that the tower is mired in speculation, with nary a suspect to point a finger at. It makes you wonder who's really pulling the strings here. As they say, only time will tell. We then get to 3 days later, and to the Thunder faction expedition team. Lihana looks at Will, who looks down and asks him what's wrong. Will tells her that he was just wondering if it would be easy to access the peak of the tower from the outside. Lihana explains that it's not just hard but impossible. The apex is protected by an abundance of carefully crafted spells that would intercept any would-be interloper, and they're practically invisible to the naked eye. Only during special events like sky races and Terminalia are these spells, for lack of a better word, deactivated, but the magic is engraved directly into the tower. Anyone who tries to penetrate it would quite literally be obliterated, ending it by saying that, in short, it's without question that infiltrating from outside is extremely difficult. Will still looks a bit hesitant, but he then says that he understands. We then get to Guilford, who screams out. He tells everyone to have their eyes on him. From here on out, they will be departing on a dungeon expedition as the Thunder faction, telling them to slaughter every foul monster, triumph over every labyrinth, and show them thirst for power. Keep in mind the Wand of Thunder only wants one thing, and that is pure might. With that, he tells everyone on the expedition team to move out, but we also see Ceridwen looking at this. But it's not only her, as we also see Wignall and Colette in the shadows, saying that they can't believe that they are actually going. After that, we get a flashback to Sion as we see his father. His father says that the crest of House Ulster is the Great Falcon. With its keen eyes, the falcon hones in on its enemy, and then it descends, sharp talons first, to tear its target asunder. He continues as he says that they are a house of hunters, forever pursuing their foes to the ends of the world, the embodiment of fiery destruction. After that, he turns around and looks to Sion, telling him that the time has come for the descendants of the great falcon to evolve. Sion just aura farms as he looks at him. Anyway, his father, who we learned is called Caesar, tells Sion that from their ancient beginnings as Berdalians, they were driven by vengeance, retribution, and rebellion, and as harbingers of fury and spite, they laid waste to any who stood against them. There is a history of immoderate destruction, of wanton ruination. However, even then that bloody history ends with Caesar. Caesar tells Sion that from now on, the falcon will not use its claws or its beak, but instead spread its wings to protect those it holds dear. Caesar then calls out to Sion, telling him that a fierce blaze of passion burns within him, yet he is a tender and kind soul. That is why, as the rightful heir to this house, the responsibility of protecting his mother and Cyrene falls to him. Sion looks right at him and tells him that he understands. With that, we see Sion walking, and he goes into a room. There is Cyrene, who is the eldest daughter. She calls out to him and tells him that she heard about what Caesar said and that she is sorry, telling Sion that she can't believe he thought it would be okay to put the weight of their entire house on his shoulders. Sion sits next to her on the bed as he tells her that there's no need to apologize. He has a smile as he tells her that he is the oldest boy after all, saying that it only makes sense for father to entrust the safety of their family to him, explaining to Cyrene that there is absolutely nothing for her to be sorry about. Cyrene then looks hesitant as she asks Sion if his dream wasn't to become a Magiavander. Sion gets a bit embarrassed by that as he asks her how she knew about that, but Cyrene explains that when she was by the window, she could hear him talking about it with Liril and the others. She then looks sad as she says that she wishes that she weren't ill so that he wouldn't have to give up on his dream. But just then, Sion screams out. He asks her who said anything about giving up his dream and that he isn't giving up anything, not his dream or his responsibility to their family. Cyrene looks shocked as she asks him if he really isn't going to. Sion seems confident as he tells her that of course not, telling her that he is going to do both. He can become a Magiavander and keep their house safe. He will do it all to protect her. Cyrene then starts to laugh. However, we don't get to see why just yet as we go back to Cariot, who looks out of the window and tells Sion that it seems that the Thunder faction's gone off on their expedition. He then looks back right at Sion and asks him what he will do now. Cariot continues as he tells Sion that he has what he needs, the technique, the incantations, and the knowledge of guardian circles. He fulfills every condition necessary to call forth a lion of his own. Though it's unfortunate his magic lacks a certain level of refinement and magnitude, he should have no problem summoning a cub at the very least. All that's left is the will to do it. He looks right at Sion and asks him if he has what it takes. After that, we can see that some sort of fire snake is starting to appear right ahead of Sion and is looking to go right at him. Sion obviously sees this and is super confused, but not long after he locks in as he says, "Burn, raise, and fury consume. From the dreaded domain of the Sable Fang, I summon thee. Arise, Black Flame Lion." But even then we can see that nothing seems to be coming out of his wand, except small flames. Cariot then, without a single hesitation says, "Krimuth Selba," as he then fires the snake-looking creature right at Sion. Now this fire is the real deal, as it even makes Sion go right into one of those stone pillars, as he then screams from the pain. We then see him down on the floor as he tries to look up. He calls it ridiculous, asking why he is being put through this nonsense. He continues to think that the Black Flame Lion is a secret spell passed down only to ascendants. How does Cariot expect him to know it when he hasn't even set foot in the domain of trials? He starts to look filled with despair. When Cariot calls out to him, he asks if Sion is thinking that it's too soon right now. Sion looks up and seems to be super surprised that he was able to guess it. But Cariot continues and says that he is thinking that he couldn't possibly know how this spell works, explaining that Sion can't hide his excuses from him, continuing and saying that he understands better than even Sion himself that this task is absurd, perhaps even nonsensical. Sion has said not one word, but he can almost hear him scorn himself, and he is inclined to even agree with Sion. However, he then starts to emanate more fire as he says that he should know this. There's no room for excuses against the truly absurd, saying that the real violence, genuine evil, the indiscriminate cruelty that inhabits this world will not wait for him to grow strong enough to face it. This seems to really click with Sion. After that, Sion starts to see a vision of will ahead of him, and Cariot tells him to allow him to tell him that the only reason that he is before him today is because he was lucky. Not everyone can have someone so strong on and by their side. This really upsets Sion as he looks extremely angrily at the ground. We then see Logwell, who is on the side. He thinks that roiling in anger and a sense of inferiority and humiliation truly is the greatest motivator. He starts to wonder if he is a volcano on the verge of a cataclysmic eruption or a blazing flower ready to wait and bloom, explaining that if he were Cariot, then this is where he would make his move. With that, we see Cariot looking right at Logwell, and in his head, he says that he already knows, even perhaps a bit too well. We then see a flashback to Cariot by Logwell, while also Werkner, Edward and Claire are a bit away from them. Cariot thinks that after all, just like Edward and all the others that came before him, he has seen how Logwell teaches firsthand. With that, Cariot then gets another smirk, and he speaks up, telling Sion that since he is struggling, here's a hint, telling him that they, the Lizants, are often called the people of paradise, but by nature they are flowers. Sion just looks super confused as to why he is talking about flowers all of a sudden when he is almost on the verge of dying. Anyway, Cariot starts to play with fire while saying that you can call it a gift, a font, a blessing, or whatever. In each and every one of them lies a dormant bud. This bud thirsts as any bud would and won't bloom until it's given what it thirsts for. Sion looks at this closely as he questions what it is that the bud thirsts for. Cariot then asks him what the bud inside of him desires. Sion asks himself what the impetus behind his aspirations is. However, he doesn't have a clear answer yet, so Cariot continues. He says that now that he has practically given him the answer, let's be done with this, shall we? Telling Sion that again, if he fails this task, his magic will kill him, simple as that. He has Cariot's word as the wand of fire, saying to Sion that if he wants to save his friends, then he should find a way to feed the beast within quickly. With that, we see his black flame lion behind him already. Sion also doesn't waste a second as he takes out his wand. We then see the lion shooting more fire against him. Luckily, this time Sion manages to block it with a spell. However, while he is in this position, he wonders what his bud thirsts for, asking if he even yearns for anything at all, thinking that he doesn't even know where to begin. But we then cut back to Cyrene laughing, and she says that she can't help but laugh a little as she hears it. Sion seems to be a bit annoyed by that as he asks her what's so funny. Cyrene tells Sion that she was laughing because Sion almost said the exact same thing to his friends. After that, we even see Sion, who is surprised, as he asks if he really did that. Cyrene explains that he said that when Lyril was getting bullied, and when Gordon got into a fight. We then see Sion confidently announcing that from now on, they are under his wing. When he becomes a Magia Vander, he is going to do everything in his power to protect them. Cyrene tells him that if it means protecting others, then he will take on any duty and even embrace any dream. We then see her squeezing his hand as she tells him to now soar on, no matter how much they weigh him down, just like a real great falcon. With that, we get into real-time Sion's thoughts as he wonders if this is really what drives him, a desire to protect others from harm. Is that where it all began? First it was his sister, then it was his friends. The list of people he wanted to protect has grown to be long. He then thinks about Will and says that even he was on it. Sion just wanted to keep him safe, but before he could say it, he told himself that it was wrong. Telling himself that it was not what he wanted, Sion starts to look a bit annoyed as he thinks that he didn't want to protect Will and that he doesn't need his protection. Sion thinks that he is going to show Will that he can do more, that he can be better than he has ever been. And if Will tries to come to his aid, even after he has proven that he is stronger than him, then he can expect him to come to his aid whether he likes it or not. He then pushes away the imaginary Will, but we can then see the imaginary Will just smile at him. After that, we get back to the fight where we see the lion running right at Sion. Sion, however, thinks that he doesn't need any claws or even fangs. He starts to play with fire as he knows that a lion will do little to help him soar past Will. He starts to look intense as he thinks that if he really wants to fly, then he will need wings. With that, we see him completely locked in as he starts to get a ton of fire around him. Then in the next panel, we can see him saying Incendia Halcon, and with that, we see a whole falcon bird by him. Cariot can't believe this, as he thinks that clearly it's not a black flame lion. He starts to wonder if Sion just created a new spell, but he later says that he adapted it and made it his own. Thinking that the Ulsters trace their origins back to the Great Falcon, the spell and his lineage merged together, giving birth to this new extraordinary beast. While this is going on, we have Logwell on the side, thinking that the wings of the Guardian shield them from all harm. And seriously, just look at this panel. This is just pure cinema. Like, this art in this series is outstanding. Anyway, back to Sion, who looks super immersed in this as he tells his falcon to surge forth, and he does so in an instant as we see the falcon going right towards Cariot's lion and giving it a taste of real fire. As Cariot sees this, he can't help but start to laugh uncontrollably. He says that the bud thirsts to protect. He is so painfully reminded of a certain imbecile by the name of Cariot, explaining that the successors of fire never fail to surprise. But while Cariot is laughing, we see Sion down on the ground grasping for air. Sion then looks up and sees his own creation, a blazing falcon with black and red wings, wondering how he managed to do it. Cariot then continues and tells him that he put so little magic into his lion, one would think that he was bluffing about killing it, but perhaps that's just his excuse for falling short. Though he doesn't remember asking Sion to do so, he has still bested his lion, and for that feat, he is going to give Sion his kudos, telling him, "Well done," while patting him on his head. Sion looks confused before he then snaps back to reality and gets back in an instant as he asks Cariot, "What was that for?" Cariot just apologizes but asks what he can say. Sion's performance was just that exciting. He asks if it is so strange to forget who he is when faced with an unexpected outcome. He then says that he believes that Claire and the others would call that being a softie. Sion is super lost and confused as he then screams out. He asks if Cariot is his enemy or not, telling him that it's enough of this silliness and to just tell him already. Cariot just starts to look visibly exhausted as he says that after everything he has done to mold Sion into what he is, he still doubts him and he calls it upsetting. Sion just screams at him and asks him how he could not. Cariot has done nothing but make vaguely profound statements. This entire time, Cariot tells him that he is merely vexatious to stoke his flame, telling him to try and keep it up. He then starts to walk back to his chair, as he says that in any case, he promised that he would tell him what he knows if he passed this trial. With that, he tells Sion to listen closely. Cariot then takes out his wand and suddenly starts to light some fire on top of Sion's uniform. Sion gets scared, but he then notices that he burned off their faction emblem, and he wonders why. Cariot then calls out his name. He says that Sion and his friends have only just entered the tower, yet they are already marked. Asking if he doesn't think that it's odd, he tells Sion that they have been monitored, specifically targeted, and sacrificed in the name of accelerating this plot of puppets. He continues and tells Sion that it's as if whoever's behind this already knew that they were spies. Sion starts to look worried, but Cariot thinks that he should put it this way. Perhaps their conversations haven't been as private as they all think that they have been. Sion then touches his emblem and sees a listening device under it, and he looks shocked as he calls it impossible. After that, we head to a weird room. Here we can see a mysterious guy who is listening in on all of their conversations. Suddenly, he speaks up and tells them to pay attention, saying that this is a message for all comrades. The Thunder faction is currently clearing the 20th floor with no sign of retreat, continuing as they say that the party is close at hand. Prepare to sing and dance. With that, we see one from Gotia. They say that this world is wrapped, a grand stage of lies and deception, constructed by the very mages that sealed off the stairway to the heavens. But tonight is the moment they restore the truth. They shall release Baal and bring back the true sky. After that, we see a ton of the Gotia members, and the text tells them to rise, comrades in devastation. Let their crusade begin. And just then, we get back to the city, where a big explosion happens, and someone screams that they are under attack. Colette says that they are here, and Wignall says that they will face them head-on and tells Colette to come on. We head to the tower and into the first stratum and the colorless courtyard. Here we see a huge explosion, and someone screams that they are under attack. After that, we get introduced to someone called Aaron, and he is a colorless mage, but he is starting to freak out, wondering just why this is happening and that he doesn't get it at all. He gets to the inner circle where he screams that colorless mages and mages from other factions are attacking the tower, explaining that it appears they're blindly firing off spells and advancing on every front. We then head to Claire, who is in the sky. She tells everyone through their telephone thing that the enemy's puppet magic has taken control of them. She calls out to some people called Masha and Niall, and also Otto. She tells them to get their squads in order, just like they previously discussed. With that, we see all of them starting to lock in, and Claire also continues. She tells them to remember these mages are their allies. Use barriers and binding spells. Their priority is to immobilize them. If that proves impossible, crush them with whatever they got, telling them to never mind the mages in the south and west. Just focus on getting the north and east under control. But just then, Claire feels something, and after that, we see a huge dark attack just miss her. We then see a mage on a rooftop. He is covered in a rope as they ask Claire if she is sharing intel she has on their grand plan with mages that haven't fallen under control. They continue and say that they would ask how she figured out they were safe, but such cunning is to be expected of a mediator. Claire looks back at them and just wonders who that is. The man, however, says it's a pleasure to make her acquaintance, saying that he is one of the distinguished leaders of Gotia. However, before they can finish their sentences, we see the goat, Sarissa, coming by. She tells the man that it's enough with the theatrics, and then she calls the man Walter. telling him that he was a suspect from the very start. Explaining that one would think the leader of the dark faction would at least try to look and act more inconspicuous, Walther just starts to laugh a bunch as he then removes his mask and throws it to the side. We then see him, and he looks just as ugly as ever. He tells Sarissa that it's hateful of her to judge a person by their appearance. He then calls them bigots, all of them. But that's not all. As we see, his title changed from Dark Faction Chief to Gotia Leader. Walther continues as he says that Sarissa is a woman with a heart as cold as steel, but he must ask, where is her impudent leader? He asks if she doesn't know the tower's in danger. Sarissa just looks right at him. She tells him that unfortunately, Elfie is a bit busy at the moment, explaining that she told Elfie to focus on her work and to leave the mess happening down here to them. She then says that they should go back to Walther. She tells him that his obsession with studying the peculiar, she assumes that he has a crafty scheme or two up his sleeve, telling him to rest assured, as if his plans involve harming Elfie, then she will stop him. Walther just starts to laugh as he says that the narcissist now fancies herself a protector, asking if she has been defanged by a shiftless brat and calling her his dear ice maiden. We then see how mad Sarissa seems to get by that, as she then sends a spell right at him. She screams at him to not call her that, or she won't hesitate to blow him to bits. We then once again move back to Claire. She speaks up and tells Walther that she will give him an opportunity to explain himself, asking him why he wants to destroy the tower. She explains that if the tower falls, then the celestial hosts come back, and the world as they know it will be lost, telling him that they can't allow the lore to become their reality. But we then see Walther, who looks more creepy than before as he calls them fools. He then screams out and says that every single one of them is an absolute idiot. He starts to summon some spell as he explains that tethering themselves to a false fate will open their eyes. He asks them how they cannot see that this world is merely a diorama, a diminutive garden that belongs to the Mage Queen. Beyond the deception lies a world of truth where his dark magic will reach its zenith. He continues and says that by annihilating them, the vapid vassals of destiny, he shall ascend to the greatest heights of magic. After that, we see that his summoned circle has grown super huge, and he then uses the spell called Calcicul Metes. But we then seem to completely cut away from it as we get to the Eastern Reach and the Plain of Solitude. Here we see a bunch of the old people from the Earth faction. They scream out that they are the Colette Covercrops. They continue as they say that it's sad to see the Wind faction fall just as far as the Dark faction does. After that, we see them chasing someone from Gohita who screams at them to get away. However, the old people manage to get off his mask, and we then see that it was none other than Arvin, who was the Wind faction chief, and he is now revealed to be a Gohita leader. The Earth people explain that they were supposed to be Stratum mates, but then say that it's a shame on them. After that, we see the two other members from Gotia behind Arvin. They call them Dusty Earth Mages and tell Arvin to bestow upon them the blessing of Gotia. Arvin, however, seems to be freaking out as he doesn't know what to do. He starts to freak out even more as he gets into some sort of manic state as he just goes on about how trash he is. When he is done with that, he then screams out. He says that nobody understands him, nobody gets who he is, and the only person that cares is she. I'm guessing that he is talking about Monica right here, but it's hard to know for sure. Anyway, he continues and says that he is a hopeless babbling baby, and she's the only one who can guide him. With that, we see him holding something that he calls candy, and he then decides to eat it. As he crunches it and swallows it, he right away starts to get up on his feet. We then get a close-up on him, and he has got a totally other vibe about himself. He now looks scary as he tells them to scatter and calls them decrepit fools, saying that tonight is the night they uncover the truth hidden behind the sky, the truth they all fight so desperately to conceal, ending it by saying that it's glory to Gotia. After that, he uses a spell called Carvante Krugel, which seems to create a massive tornado around them. The Earth Mages tell each other to stay close. He then asks Aravan when he became a user of dark magic. Another one is in his head as he thinks that it's a cyclone barrier that mangles anyone who approaches and explains that he has got them trapped. We then move back to Arvin, who is on the telephone. He speaks out and tells someone that he has ensnared the Earth Mages and tells someone to release the Slime Brigade. With that, we move back to Main City. Here, we see a mage being sent back and screaming in pain. He wonders why their spells aren't working. However, as he looks closer at the members of Gohita, he sees that they aren't just puppets, but instead they are holding on to the mage killers, and that it's the weapon they saw at the Terminalia. With that, he finally understands that it's why their spells aren't hitting them. After that, we see another mage. He questions where their backup is, saying that if they had Worgen and his mage's earth magic, then they could at least put up a fight. Another one says that they're tied up on the eastern front and that they can forget about reinforcements. We then move back to another mage who gets sent in right to a building and also screams out. We then see that it was none other than Aaron. His vision starts to get blurry as he explains that this is it and this is where he dies. He thinks that he doesn't know what is happening, but this is different from the monsters at Terminalia. He wonders how they are supposed to win against an enemy with magic, when their own spells don't even work on them, even calling it ridiculous. He continues to be in his head as he says that both Tony and Mary have turned into puppets. They have been fighting at a disadvantage from the start, but it doesn't even matter, as they are going to die and it's all over anyway. However, someone has something else to say about that. We then see Wignall, who gets out his wand and says, "Heed his call, O healing forest. Grow and flourish," he then says to Alheimringul. And he then actually manages to get out that spell as we get back to Aaron, who says that his wound is now gone. He wonders how a wound so deep could just vanish, and questions if this is elven healing magic. We then move back to Wignall, whom we can see is taking a deep breath. We then get back into a flashback. Here we see Lafia telling Wignall that he must realize, if he had mastery of their healing magic, many of the struggles he experienced would have been no more than slight complications. She continues and tells him that he could have aided his comrades in their hour of need, instead of watching them yield to their wounds. Lefia tells him to remember what he could have done, and Filvis adds on to let those thoughts guide him to becoming a beacon of hope to his allies, a supportive hand on the battlefield, and a healer. With that, we move back to real time, where he looks intense. He says that it's time to put his training with Master Lafia and Filvis to use, explaining that as long as he is standing, he can help the other mages hold the line. If they succumb to despair, it is up to him to shine light upon them. He continues as he thinks that, of course, his healing alone won't be enough to push the enemy back. They will have to devise a way to tackle the mage killers they're wielding if they want to turn the tide. But just as he says that, someone tells him to keep it up. We then see that it's Colette, who looks super cold as she tells all of them that she is going to take care of this. We then move into some sort of flashback. Here, we see her telling her old self that she hates her. She tells her that her hair's a mess, she looks awful, and she resents everyone she meets. She is a disturbing embarrassment. She breaks everything she touches, and that's why she is afraid of her. Her old self looks sad before she looks up to Colette and asks her if she knows something. She then gets a huge smile as she explains that Will said that she liked her. She continues and explains that her best friend in the world said that he likes her just the way she is. The older Colette then starts to laugh and tells the younger one that she is right. She then goes to hug her and asks if she doesn't want to help her protect their best friend and all the people they love, even asking her to please help her lend her the strength. And as she said that, we saw Colette looking a bit strange. However, she then says, "First seal, limiter unlocked." After that, we see her right eye starting to turn completely dark as she then says, "Loar Sika, Grantin Ibratia," and with that, we then see two huge stone-looking hands coming out. She then puts them in front of herself, blocking the attack from Gotia. The Gotia members can't believe their eyes. They wonder if these are the hands of a golem. Someone else says that they can't be, and that they are massive. The third one says that whatever they are, they blocked their spells. After that, we move back to Colette, who starts to look more and more insane as she holds out her wand and says, "Locked on," and her hands to crush them, which I just have to say is super cool. Meanwhile, the Gotia members see the hands going right at them, and they ask her if she is trying to use magecraft against them. They explain that the mage killer Sleem will devour that lump of earth faster, but before he is even allowed to finish his sentence, we see the stone hands going right into them and creating a massive explosion. We then cut back to Colette, who explains that these hands aren't magecraft, continuing and saying that they are a piece of the world itself. Passing through that gate that her body has for generations, from her mother to her grandmother and beyond, the magical realm has entwined itself with the lores, weaving their lineage into its very essence. Colette tells them that she learned something from the events at Terminalia, saying that you can stop magic, but you can't stop the world, and we then see her sending the hands right at them again. We cut over to Aaron, who thinks that there's no way, explaining that she just broke through the mage killers with brute force alone. Wignall on the side says that they are witnessing the true might of the Earth Princess. After that, he speaks up and screams at the others. He tells them that this is their chance on the offensive, telling them to get their wands out and to rally around Colette and drive the enemy back. But sadly, we then leave them for now as we instead go over to Ceridwen. She is flying around on her broom and thinks that that generation of disquiet is doing quite well for themselves. Not so long ago, they were just students. The academy would be proud to see just how much they've grown. She starts to smile as she continues and thinks that in any case, it's nice to know the front line has made progress. But now all that's left is the back line. With that, we cut to Monica, who is walking in a dark hallway. She then gets interrupted by Will, who asks her where she is going on. Lehana tells her that the only thing past this point is the Collis panel, but she is sure that she already know that. Asking if that isn't true, Monica just looks at them and asks both Will and Lehana what they are doing here. She continues and asks them if they aren't supposed to be out on an expedition with the rest of the Thunder faction. Will, however, tells her that he made a promise with Zio. We then cut back to after his and Zio's fight, where he told Zio to wait. He holds his chest and tells Zio that staying to fight will make him strong and that he is sure of it. It will give him the strength to protect the tower and everyone inside and outside of it. Zio then waits up, and Will continues as he explains that it will make him stronger than the entire Thunder faction, even stronger than Zio himself. Will looks more ready than ever as he tells Zio that he promises him he will have more to gain from staying here than going on that expedition, asking Zio to please let him stay. It then gets silent before Zio says, "You don't put chains on desire, so now they share maxims too." After that, he looks back at Will and tells him that if next time he sees him, he has gone soft, then he is lighting him up himself. With that, we head back to real time, where Will says that they lent their uniforms to a couple of their friends and had Miss Ceridwen cast a spell to make them look like them, explaining that this gave them the freedom to come here, to lie in wait, and to watch for anyone looking to shut down the Collis panel. We then get to Monica, who starts to panic as she asks them if they think that it's why she is here, telling them that she just came here to see if everything was secure. However, both Lehana and Will don't back down as they tell her that if that's really why she came here, then she can leave, saying that they are all the security this area needs. However, Monica doesn't seem to leave, so Lehana asks her if something is wrong, telling her that she doesn't look so good. Lehana tells her that she is curious as to why she is here instead of on the front lines helping the other mages. Monica then starts to clench her hand. Meanwhile, Lehana asks her if they are perhaps wasting her time, saying that it wouldn't bode well for her plan and finally calling her a puppeteer. With that, we see her taking out a wand and starting to transform herself. She then takes off her rope and we see that it's Shade. She calls them dirty rats and says that they have got it all figured out, don't they? Explaining that she has had enough with the meddling brats and that it's time for them to say goodbye. But with that, we see both Will and Lehana starting to get ready and lock in. After that, we cut to the Thunder faction, who are at the 25th floor, and they finally learn that both Lehana and Will were spying on them. We see Olgano saying that he should have known that something was up, thinking that it explains why those two have been acting so fishy. Milia, on his side, says that she is now convinced that the tower's really messed up, saying that if they were the ones spying, why would the higher-ups tell them that there might be a traitor among the new recruits? But just then, Guilford speaks up, and he tells them that it was mutual surveillance, explaining that they were hoping to bring the traitors out by having them keep an eye on each other. Guilford continues, as he says that the enemy wouldn't be swayed by the tower's intel, and that they moved according to their own agenda. Just then, Zio drops by and adds on. He says that by causing confusion by intentionally muddying the waters, it's just Whitebeard doing what he always does. He starts to walk forward as he says that, watching the chaos from above and reading every move as both sides scramble to make sense of things, explaining that as long as he's at the top, the tower isn't going anywhere. Just then, however, we cut back to Shade, Will, and Lehana. All of them are starting to get ready for a fight, and Shade starts to attack as she uses her Berzem Seek, Mavelus Kadzul. This attack starts to summon a bunch of chains around them, but luckily Will explains that he has already seen it, and with that, both he and Lehana manage to completely break them, and after that, it's their turn to go on the offensive as Liana uses her Owen Seek, Lisolda Dua attack, which first off looks sick as she seems to be bouncing off the walls with her lightning. Shade sees her coming scarily close, so she then uses an attack called Darge, which seems to create a barrier around her. We then head into her brain as she says that these narrow hallways aren't doing her any favors in dodging her stupid thunder spells, and as long as Will is around, there's no using whipping out a mage killer. She then starts to wonder if they actually managed to set them up. Shade thinks back and realizes that they've positioned the tower's forces out front, and those thunder dolts, who are supposed to be out in the dungeon, in the rear, giving them the option to catch her off guard. She then ends it by saying that they've been waiting to spring this perfect trap of theirs the moment she infiltrated, and just like that, Shade falls for it like a fool. But just as she says that, we see Will coming right at her side. Shade sees him, but by that time it's already way too late, as then in the next chapter, we see Shade being slammed right into the wall. Shade is then on the floor being visibly hurt, and she calls them a bunch of clever little rats. She screams at them and asks if they think that they are one step ahead of them. Just then, however, she takes out her wand and sends a dark attack right above her. This makes it so that there comes a pretty easy escape route for her, as she then uses her chains to grab a hold of her before she then goes right through the roof, leaving both Will and Lihana completely mind-blown and confused. Will explains that she is running away, and Lihana adds on that they were so close. Lihana then asks him what the plan is and if they are going to chase after her. Will says that he would like to, but that they can't leave the Collis panel unprotected. But just then, someone tells them to go and the panel will be safe. Will listens carefully to the voice and realizes that it's none other than Kreutz. Kreutz continues and tells them that a significant number of their mages are under the control of that puppeteer. Nothing will do more to sway this conflict in their favor than incapacitating her, and seeing as their synergy is effective against her, he shall leave her to them, telling both Will and Lihana that this floor is now under his protection. Lihana is just silent before asking Kreutz how they can know that he isn't a puppet, or if he can even prove to them that he isn't one of the traitors. Kreutz just puts up his glasses and explains that he is Kreutz. If he was working with the enemy, they can be sure that the Collis panel would have already fallen, telling them to just once he wishes for them to use their heads, ending it by telling them to now hurry. Will tells him that they understand, and he then tells Lihana to go. With that, both of them start to chase after Shade again. With that, however, we go back to Caradwyn, who is also looking at this. She thinks that Gautier seems to think that they are the only ones capable of plotting in the dark, but they are sadly mistaken. If only they knew how long this has been in the works for, circulating intel about the traitor, having factions monitor each other, tasking Will and his cohorts with espionage. The events at Terminalia may have put all of this into motion, but Aaron has been conducting clandestine investigations into hostile forces within the tower long before that. She continues and says that once they skim the scum off the surface of this simmering soup, all that's left to do is eat. But she believes one more trap is in order before indulging in the final supper, telling us that it will be simple, as long as they are wary of their enemy's eyes and ears. Just then, we see the guy who was listening in on everyone's conversations, Sion's especially. We then get a close-up to his mouth as he says, "An anomaly in the North Quadrant." Groups Serpent and Scarlet stop moving from their position, but just as he says that, suddenly, the door behind him starts to open up. We see that it's none other than Sion, who tells someone that they have an interesting operation here. And just then, we see the mysterious person who turns out to be Bernthal. Bernthal calls him master and just looks at him. Sion's friends question if the boutique Riser always had this secret room. Just then, they ask Bernthal if he was listening in on them. Every new entrant into the tower goes in wearing two things. The Gloria they are dressed in now, and this brooch that Sion is holding. Sion tells him that the only way one could easily listen in on the conversations of mages from different factions is through the brooches they all bear. And the only person that could have affixed these brooches to their Gloria is none other than the tailor who made them, and he screams that right at Bernthal. He asks Bernthal if that isn't right, and we then see it going dark behind of Bernthal as he looks at Sion seriously. Sion screams at him, telling Bernthal to say that he is wrong, and for him to explain that he isn't working with Gohita. Sion explains that he is the man who taught him about the wonders of magic, and he can't be a traitor. Sion tells him that he always thought of Bernthal as his brother. After that, Sion sure looks desperate as he asks Bernthal what the truth is. Bernthal just starts to smile before he starts to look like a real villain, and he looks extremely menacing as he says Sion's name. But sadly, we get left on a cliffhanger there. As we head over to Kreutz, Kreutz is talking to a bunch of different mages through their telephone device and telling them what to do. But just then, Charles speaks up and asks Kreutz if he doesn't think that they should be doing more to help, explaining that the enemy has mage killers and that their mages are facing an uphill battle here, saying that if there's any time to deploy the protective gear he developed, then it's now. Kreutz, however, tells him that with the Earth Princess at the front, their forces are putting up a respectable resistance, telling Charles that they can help them by leaving them alone. Charles argues as he tells him that he can't be serious and calls him heartless. Kreutz just tells him to look at the board. They are playing a game of shadows, saying that attacking the tower, the home of Magia Vander, is a death wish. The enemy would not commit such a foolhardy act without a strategy. They are deliberately draining air resources to ensure whatever contrivance they have planned deals a lethal blow. It would behoove them to keep their cards close to their chest. We then only get into Kreutz's brain as he starts to think that these mage killers they wield have been downsized. And not only are they simple enough for the rank and file, they seem to be mass-produced. A far cry from the weapon they recovered at Terminalia, that pseudo-intellectual Walther is far too much of a fool to have accomplished that. He highly doubt that Arvin or Monica could do it either, excluding their obvious adversaries like Headless. Kreutz suspects that there is at least one more mastermind, likely with an intellect that mirrors his own if not greater. Kreutz then speaks out and asks where they could be. Where could the remaining conspirator be? But just then we see Charles behind him as he puts one of the mage killers right through Kreutz's body, telling him that he was right behind him. Kreutz looks back in total shock. Charles just says that he is ever the distrustful and cautious man. If only he weren't the paramount of the Upper Institute, they could have carried out this plan much sooner. Kreutz then starts to fall down to the floor. Meanwhile, Charles is just standing there. He tells Kreutz that it's curious. You would think someone as skeptical as himself would suspect their right-hand man, but he didn't, or perhaps he couldn't. Kreutz then looks at his tracker and asks why that didn't work. Charles just tells him that it was due to the Belladors. He has a smug expression as he says that he put them into these little crystal drop candies and hid them in his body. Can't very well smell them from inside him, right? Kreutz is shocked and asks Charles if he is under the puppet spell, and Charles tells him that he is sharp as ever. Charles tells him that Shade worked her puppet magic on him, and he became Charles, deputy of the Paramount. Charles continues and says that Arvin, the poor, unstable man, also ingested one of these candies, putting him under the influence of Shade. In doing so, he entrusted a part of his consciousness to her, and now he's the dashing and daring mage he's always longed to be. And then there's himself, a man bereft of even a hint of ill will, a meek mage with no desire to get ahead, an ever-loyal ally who serves his paramount, not out of duty but respect. Asking Kreutz if he didn't play his part well, Kreutz looks to be close to losing it as he screams Charles's name. After that, he starts to try and crawl away with all that he can. Charles tells him that he is amazed that he can still move. He is nothing if not persistent. Charles then smiles as he says that it takes great tenacity and brains to develop a counter to the slime and keep it under wraps from even his deputy. That was the one thing he wished he could have destroyed. Still, Kreutz just loves to make things difficult. Charles then holds out his wand right at Kreutz and tells him that he is Paranoia incarnate, a mage with more than just a potential to be a thorn in his side. Because of that, he is going to kill him first before exterminating the root of his unease. We then see a mage sign around his wand, and he is about to attack Kreutz, but just then, something happens around Kreutz. It's like a mud portal that forms around him and starts to absorb him. After that, we see him falling into the floor under him and being saved by this mud creature. Kreutz looks at someone and asks her who she is. We then see that it's none other than Rose, who says that she would rather be with Colette right now, but that her grandpa said, "Make sure that fussy man with the glasses is well protected." With that, we get back to Charles, who is completely stunned, wondering what that was just now. A new spell from an unknown pioneer of magic. He wonders if it was a transportation spell, but even then, it transformed the floor into mud to help him escape. He really looks annoyed before saying that this generation of disquiet is getting on his very nerves, but he then starts to walk forward and says that there is no use to dwell on it. He then calls out to Morta to be prepared to activate the circle. Morta asks him if he is sure and that none of the Magiavander is even here. Charles just tells them to do it, explaining that it's a message for all Gotia comrades, saying that in a short time he will release the mana creatures, telling them to watch for Morta's circle. As soon as it activates, obliterate the mages. All of them says that they understand. Charles then starts to press keys on the keyboard and says that it's now time to carry on with the plan. He tells Kreutz to run all he likes, because now there's nothing that he can do to stop him from turning this floating castle into his graveyard. With that, we also see him taking out his wand and firing off a spell right through the castle. Both Lihana Will and Keridwen looks lost. Meanwhile, Claire calls out to Kreutz. Then in the next scene, we see the castle completely falling down and getting crushed. But after that, we have Charles, who is floating the sky, explaining that stage 2 is now starting, asking them to see how long the tower can keep up this game of shadows. After that, however, we leave him and go to Emma, who is barely able to walk, but she looks determined as she says that she has to help them. We then head into her brain as she thinks back. She thinks that when they met, she thought that Julius was the warmest person she had ever met. But when they met again at the academy, she found that warmth had been replaced with ice. It made her sad to think that the boy she thought she knew was no more. After that, we get back to seeing Emma killing Julius. Julius, however, doesn't seem two-faced. He just says that this is all Will's fault, explaining that being good just isn't for him. After that, he looks right at Emma and tells her not to be like her brother and not to be like Ian. This seems to really shock Emma, and she thinks that Julius managed to prove her wrong. He never stopped being that boy. He helped her even after what she did to him. We then head to real time, where we see her going through the corridors. She thinks that the elves who treated her told her what Julius did, saying that if he hadn't cast this ice spell on her, then there would have been no saving her from her floralphagia. She looks serious as she thinks that she doesn't know who melted the ice that encased his heart, but she owes him her life, and because of that, she will make things right. Just as she is walking, however, she can see both Filvis and Lefia in front of her, and they call out her name. Filvis explains that there is no telling what might happen to her if you decide to fight alongside the other mages. Lefia asks her if she is sure that she wants to go. Emma without any hesitation screams that she has never been more sure of anything in her life, screaming that she has to fight for Julius. It then gets silent before Lefia tells her all right, saying that as her caregiver she gives her the permission to join them. Filvis and her have their hands tied with other duties at the moment, so they won't be able to help her. But with that said, she takes out a dagger and says that she hopes that Emma will find this useful. Emma takes the dagger in an instant, and as she is walking away, Lefia tells her good luck and for the grace of Great Tree be with her. With that, we head back to the city. A ton of people is asking for backup and saying that the castle's first wing has fallen. We see a colorless mage saying that they have got plenty of injured mages here, and a fire mage says that they will need more mages if they want to put out those fires. But just then, we see Shade running around just laughing. She says that he did it. He actually brought down that floating heap of junk. Continuing, as she says that Charles is a man after her own heart, Will, who is behind her, gets super shocked as he hears that and asks if she is serious and if it's Kreutz's right-hand man. Lihanna just asks Shade if he was working with her the whole time. Shade then stops for a while and asks if they are shocked, explaining that she turned him into a half-puppet and had him infiltrate the tower. She starts to look manic as she says that it was to annihilate that pestering paramount and that insipid institute he heads. Continuing as she explains that Charles kept her waiting for a good long while, but he finally did it. Will then take out his weapon right away as he thinks that if they have taken out Kreutz, then it means that the Corliss panel is in serious danger. He starts to look intense as he thinks that there has to be something that he can do, a strategy that he can implement, but suddenly, someone behind Shade screams that they have found her. She looks back, and we then spot both of Julius's friends. They say that they are going to pay for what she did, and that they will not be resting until they avenge him. Shade stares at them and asks them who they might be, but then she explains that she very well knows who they are. They are the little rats that hung around Julius. She screams towards them and says that she takes it, as they are looking for a new puppeteer to pull their strings. But just then, Lihanna joins in. She tells Shade to spare them her drivel, telling her that they take her out, and this is as good as one, and if she were Shade, she wouldn't like her odds right now. Shade, however, just looks smug as she says that she sure does. She explains that beating a bunch of brats who can't do anything will be a breeze. She then screams out to Morta to go for it. We then see Morta on top of a rooftop, and she tells Shade that she has got it. She looks creepy, as she then explains that she is ready to go, and we also see a bunch of other Gotia members also being ready to do something. Morta then screams that now that all 8 of them are in position. Let's get this mage hunt started. With that, she takes her mage killer up at the sky, and with that, she says the spell, Chaos Bloom, Slime Magland. And we then see a ton of dark beams going up at the sky, and also a huge magic circle. We then right away get to Colette, whose hands fall down, and she looks really shocked. Sarissa looks around and wonders just what these black flowers is. Meanwhile, Claire, who is behind her, she seems to be falling down from her broom. Sarissa then right away screams out to her, but sadly, we then see Walter again, who is someone no one wants to see. He laughs and says that finally the circle's been activated. He asks Sarissa what she thinks, asking if it isn't a wonderful work of magic devised by Charles and theirs truly. We then head to Lihanna and Will. Lihanna explains that whatever it is affecting their communicating thing also. Will, however, says that he knows what it happening but explains that it should be impossible. Then we see Shade, who screams that it's a barrier imbued with the power of the Sleam, a crazy circle capable of stripping everyone in it of their ability to use magic. That is, unless you have a special Sleam of their own, which of course Shade actually does. After that, we get to the Plane of Solitude again, and into the tornado. Here we see Arvin saying that it's only a matter of time until Charles destroys the Collis panel, and without magic, there's nothing they can do about it. After Arvin, it's Morta who says that first, it's bye-bye to the Collis panel, then it's hello to the floor guards. She looks super happy as she says that the tower will come crashing down, and Baal will finally be theirs, and with that, Gotia will win. We then sadly move to Walther, who tells Sarissa to face it, and that the tower has lost. It then looks like he is about to inflict a final critical spell, killing her life. But we then cut to Julius's friends, who ask what is happening as he questions why they can't seem to cast any spells. They call it pathetic and say that Julius's killer is right in front of them, but even then they can do nothing. But then we move to the goat. Will, who thinks that this is Gautia's plan to bring down the tower, is unfolding right before their eyes, and they mean to take the Magiavander with it. Sadly, we then leave our boy and see Shade, who says that originally the plan was to lure the Magiavander out and blast them to bits, but she couldn't give a care if they show or not. They can sit at the top of their tower and watch them destroy it for all they care. Will thinks that the first stratum is a dead zone for anyone that uses magic. The Magiavander is in danger, and calling for backup is out of the question. Almost everything is working against them, but that almost is super important, as Will then looks serious as he says that they still have a sword. But just then, Shade looks right at him as she tells him that a sword's not going to save him this time. She brought just the thing to deal with him, explaining that it's all part of the plan. Just then, two huge monsters start to appear behind Shade, and then both Will and Lihana explain that those are Walth oozes. Lihana thinks that this doesn't make any sense at all, wondering how a member of Gohita is able to command mana creatures. Shade then continues her speech, as she says that it's Charles, of course, asking if they know another mage that could have done this. Continuing as she says that now that the castle's under their control, the creatures are free to roam and wreak all the havoc they want, and with that, we see the creatures going to attack Will, but seemingly missing. Shade then tries her best to send chains at him, but it seems like he is able to destroy them. He then thinks that he would try to use Prime Pathos, but this is just too much for him to handle on his own, explaining that he can't deal with these creatures and the enemy's magic, and at this rate, he won't have any room to protect Lihana and the others. He says that their spells cover the entire first stratum. Until he disables it, nobody's going to be able to fight back. Will looks up at the sky and says that it looks like there are 7, or rather 8 cast points. If he can get rid of just one of them, then they will be back in business. Shade looks at him and says that she knows what he is doing. He is trying to figure out where the barrier starts. But even then it's a little late for that, screaming at Will that it's over and that he is hers, telling him to say goodbye to his useless friends and that there's nothing more pathetic in this world than a mage who can't use magic. But just as she says that, we see Emma going behind her and stabbing her with a knife. Shade, however, looks unfazed as she just looks at her. We then see for some reason that Emma missed. Shade asks her what the matter is, asking her if anyone hasn't taught her that daggers are dangerous. With that, she then punches Emma away with full force, and Will screams out for her. Shade looks at Emma and asks her if this is how she repays her adjutant for looking after her. You stab her in the back. Emma just screams out her name, telling her that she will never forgive her for what she made her do, saying that Julius saved her from Shade and she is here to return the favor. But just then, Shade cuts her off. She asks Emma if she wants to talk about Julius, telling her that they should get their stories straight first. She then starts to look manic as she screams at Emma that he died because of her, and that it was she who killed him. She stood right in front of him, put her wand to his chest, and blew a hole clear through him with a wind spell no less, telling Emma to make no mistake and that it was only her. Julius's friends then join in and tell Shade to stop lying and that she killed Julius, explaining that Emma was under her control and she forced her to do it. Shade then looks at them and asks them who is lying, telling them that they fell under her control because they were weak. If they want someone to blame, then they should blame themselves, saying that the strong take from the weak. That is the rule of this world, and it really doesn't get any simpler than that, and the very mages in the tower made sure they all knew it. She continues and says that their friend was a stone-cold idiot. They showed them what they were capable of at Terminalia, but apparently he learned nothing, and now he's dead because he tried to save a bunch of hopeless nobodies, and after that, she just starts to laugh a ton. But while she is doing so, Emma speaks up and tells her that she is wrong. She explains that Julius wasn't a loser. He was a proud mage whom people cared about, and the tears they shed in his memory are proof of that. He wasn't always the nicest person, and he was more sarcastic than most, but they wouldn't be here if it weren't for him, saying that Julius was the warmest person she had ever known, and she won't stand here and let a monster like her tell them any different. Shade then tells her that it's enough with the sob story, asking her why they don't just have her dear friend save her again, telling Emma to go ahead and call out to her so kind and so dead Julius, saying that she is sure that he will come to the rescue. Shade then starts to go towards her and is about to give the finishing blow, telling her that her friend's grave is going to get a lot warmer when she joins him. We then see Will coming at her and screaming her name, but before he can do that, we see one of the persons with the Gautia outfit. They say, "Untie, echoes of the past, Stella colors," And with that, we see a ton of ice appearing around Shade and the creatures. Shade starts to scream out in pain. We then see another Gotia member asking what they are doing, but the mysterious person just sends them flying. After that, they start to take off their outfits as they say that he has got a lot of choice words for her. But first, he has to say she really kicked herself down by practically asking for him to show up. And we then see that it's none other than Julius, which is sick and just amazing. We see his friends being super shocked and starting to cry, not to mention Emma, who can't seem to hold it in anymore. Julius then throws the Gotia outfit away and tells them to rejoice, as their hero's back from the dead, and honestly, he looks so insanely cool as he says that. With that, we then head into a flashback where we see Julius bleeding out. He looks up and says that it's so cold and that everything looks so cloudy. He starts to lose his spark as he thinks that this is what dying is like. Just then, however, we see two mages running to him. One of them is Iris, and she says that they were too late, frightening how easily puppeteers can make their victims commit such heinous acts. The guy to her right says that Julius seems to be still alive. They continue and say that they must make sure few else know. He explains that they should stage his death with his mastery of art. Weiss will prove useful in catching their enemy off guard. We then get to Julius, who in his head just wonders who that is. But we then see that it was none other than Rosti who told him to bear with him, telling Julius that he will keep his talisman safe for the time being. After that, we get to real time, where Julius thinks that just like that, a random mage saved him from the blink of death. Next, when he awoke, he was on a bed, safe and sound. But still, he was sure that he had heard that voice somewhere before, but he couldn't think about it anymore, as we saw both of his friends holding on to him extremely tightly. Because of that, Julius screams out. He asks them how long they are going to cling to him, and for them to get off him already, but it's almost impossible, as they just look up at him and say his name. They all say that they can't believe it, and that he is really alive. Julius asks them if they forget that they are in the middle of a war, and that they need to get a hold of themselves. He then calls over to Mimily, and tells her to do something useful for once, and tell them to go away. We then see Mimily, who clenches her fist as she asks Julius why she should do it. But then in the next panel we see her with huge tears, and she is always super happy to see Julius alive. Julius just screams at her, and tells her not to be like the others. But while that is going on, we then see Will, who says Julius' names with a smile. Julius looks at him and asks him why he is the only one who's not surprised. Will tells him that it didn't take long to figure out that his body was a product of Ars Weiss, explaining that all it took was a touch. Not even the dead get that cold. The body temperature of an Ars. The Weiss clone is the exact opposite of its caster's average, around -36. Julius just tells Will that he knows just about everything when it comes to Elfie, but Will then tells Julius that it wasn't the only reason. He then looks Julius right in his eyes as he tells him that he also believed in him. He knew that he would never let himself die on them like that he would come and help them in the end, and with that, both of them just smile at each other. Just then, however, Lihanna comes by. She says that Elfie helped fake his death, and to keep word of his survival from spreading, the higher-ranking Ice Faction mages covered it up. Just as Will wrote in his letters to Colette and the others, it seems his inferences were on the mark. She then has a super smile as she tells Julius that it's good to have him back with them. All three of them then start to laugh before Julius tells them that it's enough with the emotions. They all then start to look determined as he says that it's time to push back. We then see Shade just breathing heavily and being pretty damaged. But after that we get this super random panel with both Elfie and Eleanor looking super pretty and super cold as they just stare right ahead, with Elfie holding Julius's talisman and Eleanor holding the collar she gave Wignall. Anyway, with that out of the way, we then see Shade, who screams out and asks just how Julius. She starts to send a bunch of chains right ahead and says that better yet, how is he able to cast spells? We then see the chains already being right by them, but luckily Julius uses his Fraud Gardinas, and Will uses his sword, and with the two of them together, they are able to destroy the chains. Shade sees this, and thinks that it's not a fluke. He's actually using magic in the barrier. She then starts to wonder if Julius actually managed to find a way out of it. With that, she speaks up. She says that there are a bunch of dumbasses in the castle. With that, she tells them to release the creatures and all of them, and to let the massacre of the whole stratum start. We then see Julius's friend saying that more mana creatures are coming. Mimily, on his side, asks if they are crazy, and if they are letting all of them go. But just then, Julius calls out to her, and he tells her to use the gem. She asks him what he is talking about, but Julius tells her to use the protective charm that she received from the Upper Institute. He tells her to attach it to the base of her wand, and then cast it away. With that, Mimily takes it out and does just like Julius told her to. After that, Julius just has a smug look as he asks Mimily to remind him what he just said. Mimily then screams that it's time for them to push back, and she uses Glace Itier, which seems to take the mana creatures out. All of them say that it worked and that they can cast spells again. We then see some strange gas-looking thing coming out of the wand. Mimily thinks that the barrier's effects have been nullified and that these charms actually work. With that, it makes her wonder if they could be the gear to counteract the effects of the mage killers. We then head to Kreutz, who is flying in the sky, and he says that they are using his anti-slay, Rose, on his right, telling him that he is looking awfully smug for someone who was just saved. After that, we cut to Ceridwen, who also has one on herself. She says that thankfully, they already assigned them to a select few mages, and she tells Kreutz to rest assured. They did it as surreptitiously as they could. They wouldn't want the traitors to find out about them after all. Kreutz, however, screams at her. He says that they were more than assigned. They were stolen by that impish ice maiden, no less. Ceridwen tells him that clearly, Gotia was getting on her last nerve, asking Kreutz if he can really blame her for doing something so drastic. But even then, she tells him not to worry, as the only mages that were given anti-slime were high-level casters such as herself, and of course, the entire ice faction. With that in mind, we then see Walther, who is screaming out of pain, and we see ice on his body. He screams out, asking what this is, telling Sarissa that she isn't supposed to be able to use magic in the first place. He starts to go manic as he screams that this is ludicrous and wonders what in the world is happening. Sarissa, however, tells him that they figured out how to deal with this so-called wonderful work of magic they developed. She then holds her wand right at him and tells him that he would hate to hear how long ago they got it done. With that said, we then cut to another ice mage who uses an ability called Rotter Hires No. With that, we see a bunch of ice spears appearing around him, and with that, he then sends them right at the mana creatures. We see Colette on the side, who is super amazed, and she says that they are from the ice faction. Wignall on the side adds that they are taking out the creatures with magic. Just then, we cut to Morta, who is still on the rooftop. She says that this is looking pretty bad, wondering if maybe she should keep up the barrier or what. But just then, the goat Rosti comes behind her and asks if they can just take it down. He looks at her and tells her that he can't think of anything less charming than hunting mages. Morta just looks at him and calls him a cutie, which, to be honest, is pretty spot on. We then see a bunch of spells coming from the rooftop before someone says that the circle is fading away. The telephone thing explains that the barrier's been broken and that spell points are down, telling everyone that magic is back on the table, telling them to quash the creatures and subdue the puppets. We then see Wignall, who says that they are back in business and that it's time for a counterattack. Colette, on his side, tells him that she is on board. We also see Julius's friends, who scream that they can still win this war, but just as they say that, we see Arvin, who explains that he doesn't think so. He looks pretty cold as he explains that the game is over and they are the victors. With that, we then see a huge beam coming right down at the ground. Following that, we can see that the entire ground is starting to shake. Someone notices that it's coming from the tower, and we then see both Lihanna and Will, who both look up in disbelief. But before we see them anymore, we see Walther, who can't help but laugh a ton. He calls out to Sarissa and says that all of her efforts only mean absolutely nothing, saying that it must feel awful to know how hard she and her ilk struggled, yet still face utter destruction. Sarissa then looks up and notices something crucial. She explains that the illusion magic surrounding the first stratum is gone. Walther then continues his speech, as he says that their end is but an inevitability now that Charles has reached the Callis panel. With that, we of course see Charles as he is starting to advance through the tunnel, while he has a bunch of mages down on the floor. We then cut to Kreutz, who asks the garrison mages to come in and says that he demands an update, but he is getting no answer. He then looks pissed as he asks for the status of the Callis panel, but sadly we then see Charles, who is going right to it. He puts his hand close to it. After that, he puts his wand into it. This makes it so that a bunch of magic circles start to appear. He then says, Control Protocol Kana, Wall of Fire, Radel, Gate of Ice, Suja, Wheel of Wind, Selza, Chain of Light, Nor Touch of Dark, Alazel Fortress of Nature, or Shana Lock of Thunder, as he has said that he begins to look really creepy as he then says that there he goes. With him out of the way, we then move to Arvin, who calls everyone fools, saying that this war has been nothing more than a grand distraction, telling them that the longer they took to defeat them, the further they fell behind. He calls it embarrassing to be this utterly outplayed. Sadly, we then move away from Arvin and instead see Shade swinging in the air with her chain. She screams out and tells everyone that their time is up. telling them to see what happens when they take their sweet time and to now watch as they cut the tower before they can cut them. She starts to laugh a bunch as she tells them to enjoy the show and to say goodbye to the seals while they still can, as after all, seeing the partitions for all the guards come down is going to be a real treat. After Shade, we cut to Emma, who asks if they are planning to dispel the guards' partitions. One of Julius's friends asks if they mean that the tower is going to start overflowing with the things that they fought during the bloom. Mimily adds on that it's not just the ones on the first stratum, but everyone until the 5th stratum, explaining that it's got to be thousands, maybe even tens of thousands of monsters, all rampaging to destroy them and the tower. We then head into Lihana's brain as she thinks that this is Gautia's plan to bring down the tower. Will looks up and thinks that they failed to stop them. But just then, we see a mad Wignall. He calls out to Colette and tells her that they have to get to the Collis panel. If they can subdue the intruder, then maybe they can stop it. But just then, we cut to Arvin, who looks at them and asks if they can't hear them, saying that it's already over. With that, we then see Shade, Arvin, and Walter. All three of them are saying to Charles to just release them and to let them forge a new legend. With that said, we obviously see Charles, who says, "Unseal partitions and disable magical interceptors." As he says that, it looks like the magic circles around him are slowly disappearing. He then starts to look creepy as he tells the tower goodnight. Just then, we see a super sad Kreutz, who begs for this to happen. He then falls to the ground and completely screams out. We then see why, as we see the guards starting to emerge from the tower. But it's not just on the 1st stratum, but also on the 4th stratum and the Thunder Faction training ground, not to mention the 30th stratum and the Domain of Trails. After that, we see Shade with a huge smile as she says that the victory goes to Gautia, thinking that it's finally over for the tower as we see a ton of monsters jumping out. But just then, we can hear someone start an incantation. They say, "By my word shall flames soon fly, so encroach on the fires of conflict and bring with them inevitable ruin, high and true." The bugles signal the outbreak of war, and all is consumed in a tempest of strife. While that goes on, we cut to Wignall, who looks at the tower and wonders what it is that is pouring out the magical energy. He starts to wonder if it can be something, but we don't get to know what it is, as just as he thinks that, we see his collar starting to light up, and suddenly, a flash comes from above in the sky. Wignall has Colette on his side, who tells him that it's a remote circle coming from his collar. With that, we see a magic circle under Wignall, which is just getting bigger and bigger. We then hear the voice again as they say, "Descend, O crimson inferno, O ruthless flames, thou art hell incarnate, the ultimate eradicator." Arvin seems to be super lost, but Walter seems to know what is going on, and Shade then finishes his thought as they think that it might be a spell by a Magiavander. The Magiavander then continue as they say, "With thy blaze bring closure to this maelstrom of war, scorch and sear, O sword of Surtur, in the name of Alf, rain down," finishing it off by saying, "Realiva Tain." With that, we then see that it was none other than Eleanor who did it, and with that said, we can see a ton of huge flame beams coming out around the entire city. Ceridwen sees this and calls it wonderfully done, saying that this was a performance fit for a princess. Though she would expect no less from a grand high elf with mastery over every form of magic, we cut to Emma, who says that the flames only targeted the guards and completely avoided mages, wondering just how that is possible. Lihana seems to also be confused, as she wonders if it was a grand incantation, but wonders where it came from. But they then understand that the spell actually managed to come all the way from the top of the tower. After that, we go back to Eleanor, who says that they lowborns are good at one thing, which is wasting her time, explaining that perhaps a royal decree will kick their wands into motion. She then looks super cool as she tells everyone else to dispose of these writhing maggots now. We then see Lefia on top of a rooftop as she says that the guards have been eliminated. She then holds out her wand as she says, "Commencing provisional seal as planned, Alf's ringhole." And just as she says that, it looks like a whole tree comes out, which then seems to go all around the tower. We see Colette, who wonders what is going on, saying that first the Zoctonia was disintegrating right in front of them, and now there's some tree covering the tower. Wignall then joins in and says she embedded a remote circle in his collar and shot them from the top of the tower. After that we get to, I think it's Aaron. He is amazed that she did it from all the way up there, explaining that you couldn't even cast a spell from that far away, let alone snipe a bunch of monsters. But after that we head into Wignall's head. He knows that it was Eleanor who cast a hyper-distant spell. He then starts to wonder if these rumblings might have affected the other floors too. With that, we head to the 4th stratum, where someone says that remote circles are activated on each floor and that the 4th stratum guards are all eliminated. We also see someone on the 30th stratum. They say that the guards have also been eliminated there. But after those nobodies, we then get to Philvis. She says that the 45 strong of the elf faction have cleared every stratum up to the 45th, saying that she believes that the mission is completed and calling out to Eleanor. With that, we head back to Eleanor, who says that Whitebeard had the nerve to ask her with such a trifling matter. She then looks smug and says that the question is if she can trust the remaining 5 to someone else, calling them dear swindlers. With that, we see Cariot, who seems to laugh as he calls it a silly thing to ask and explains that it has already been taken care of. And we then see his incantation lion behind him, which is just so sick. But after that, we get to the Gotia side, where we see Walther. He is freaking out and says that their wonderful plan turned to nothing in mere seconds, and he calls it impossible. After that, he starts to curse out the Magiavander and says that their supremacy is nothing but a blight on them all. He continues as he says that they must all be great to experience greatness, asking how they dare to steal their moment away from them. After him, we move to the gate of Pruning Grand Pass. Here we see Arvin and a bunch of Godia members who say that the guards have been annihilated. They then turn to Arvin and ask him what they are supposed to do now. But hearing that just makes him get into a real spiral as he starts to go insane. He then gets a pretty awkward laugh before he then goes to grab a hold of Mary. He puts his wand next to her and tells all of them to not move, explaining that he won't hesitate to kill a puppet and trust him. They have got plenty of them, telling all of them there that if they value the lives of their friends, then they need to drop their wands now. We then cut to Wignall, who is amazed that he is taking in hostages and calls him a coward. Arvin, however, doesn't mind that and instead says that if a massacre is what they want, then he will gladly give them one. We then head into his brain as he thinks that the plan's a bust, but they still have Shade's puppets as long as the Magiavander doesn't join the battle. Then they still have a chance. Thinking that he just has to make this gambit count, but suddenly he notices something strange, as when he looks over at Mary, he can hear her starting to whisper something. After that, it gets dark around her, and she looks right at Arvin as she then says, "Iceplosion." Arvin is super confused, but just then, in the next panel, we can see all of them being surrounded by spiky ice shards. Arvin starts to scream out and asks them what they have done. But just then, we see someone say, "El glace frose, L3, froise lol." After that, I'm a bit confused, but we then see a ton of clones by Elfie being all around them. Arvin looks genuinely scared as he says that it's Elfie's doing, which is pretty obvious to be honest. But we then move to Walther, who says that it's some shape-shifting magic. But after that, we see someone who I would guess to be the real Elfie, and she says that their force of 544 puppets is quite impressive but ultimately meaningless, because after all, what good is their legion when 300 of them are her? We see some random mages saying that they thought the hostages just exploded, and someone else says that there are too many Elfies to count, but we then see Elfie, who has the cutest smile I have ever seen. Meanwhile, Will just looks at this and seems to be in total disbelief and awe. After that, we move to Sarissa, who says that Freeze Lol is Elfie's powerful shape-shifting spell, explaining that it allows her to transform into a different person by completely masking her body in ice. Lihanna on the side says that she combined her clone and shape-shifting spells at this insane scale, wondering what it is that she isn't capable of. But after her, it's Julius's friend who tells them to wait and explains that it's not just Elfie, but it's also Julius. And we then see Julius standing right by the clones. Julius then explains that he wouldn't have been able to do this if his survival wasn't covered up. He padded the numbers a bit with his own arse. Wise clones to help Elfie focus on controlling several hundred of her own while handling her other tasks. Elfie then adds on to that as she says that it was all orchestrated to swap out the puppets with their clones, saying that judging by how many puppets there are, she assumed that they can't be controlled like Ars Weiss clones. Because of that, with the exception of half the puppets, such as Arvin himself, victims are mostly left to their own devices. They can only be given singular orders, like for example, lay waste to the first stratum. However, Elfie isn't done, as she says that what's more is how much of their perspectives can be shaped by their so-called puppeteer, which is limited, asking Shade if she isn't right, and we then pretty clearly see Shade being pretty annoyed by this. However, Elfie tells Shade that if she had such power over her puppets, she would have noticed that they replaced them a long time ago. We then get to Eleanor, who says that it is awfully haughty for someone who dumps her work onto others, explaining that their faction castle is practically overflowing with those puppets. But after her, we move to Claire, who says that this is why she told the others to ignore the mages in the south and west, as the puppets in those sectors were already replaced with Elfie's clones. Saradwen then also adds on to that, as she, while flying in the air, explains that sadly, they couldn't take care of all the puppets before the hostilities started. But, as long as they quelled the remaining ones in the north and east sectors, there's no way they would have been bested. She looks pretty smug as she says that it's almost unfair how powerful the Magiavander are, asking if it isn't like cheating. But we then see Emma, who asks them to wait, saying that everything was carried out so swiftly. The only way it could have gone this well is if they already knew the enemy's strategy beforehand. Mimily also joins in and asks if all of this has been according to their plan, saying that she doesn't understand why they would even let things get this bad. But after that we see Iris, who looks serious and says that it was to force out every bit of corruption, explaining that the foul elements that have infiltrated the tower must be eliminated. Claire and a select few others were the only ones privy to this plan. Not even the Magiavander were made aware until the last minute, which, in hindsight, may have been a mistake considering Elfie's strong reaction, but she then says that traitors in the Wind and Dark factions were somewhat known to them. What they didn't know was how deep the betrayal went and how many there truly were. The mastermind in particular was a figure they couldn't pin down until the very end, explaining that to bring it all out into the open, they drew out their plan and made it look as if they were backed into a corner, and because of that, it was all a success, thanks to Will and his amazing friends, of course. With that, we cut back to Sion, and Bernthal has just told him that he was a secret agent of the tower, which seems to leave Sion and also his friends completely stunned. Bernthal has a smile as he says that he is at once the 10th generation owner of Boutique Riser and a covert operative of the first faction. He says that he hid listening devices in them and his friends' trappings at the behest of the tower. Trust it pained him to do so, but orders are orders after all. Sion's friends speak up and say that they thought that Sion figured something out, and they then call it embarrassing, but Sion then loses it as he tells them to be silent. Sion tells Bernthal that if what he is saying is the truth, then why was Cariot talking to him as if he knew some foul plot was afoot? Bernthal just tells him that he already knows Cariot and that he loves his dramatics. Sion then asks him what he has to say about that nasty smirk he just flashed at them. Explaining that it's not the kind of smile you'd expect to see from an ally, Bernthal scratches his head and explains that at that moment, Sion said that he thought of him as his brother. He was so overcome with rapturous joy. His lips may have crooked into a not-so-friendly grin that he is very sorry about. But still, at times, to fool your enemies, you must first fool your allies, telling them that his orders were not to spy on them, but to listen in on the enemy's conversations to ascertain the truth. Saying that, to be honest, they had expected some of them to become puppets, which would have in effect allowed them to infiltrate Gotia. We then see Sion's friends, who say that they always thought that it was kind of weird, and that who would give newcomers to the towers such an important task in the first place. Bernthal tells them that there were some protections put in place to keep them from harm, but nevertheless, they exposed them to all sorts of dangers. Saying that for that he offers them an apology on behalf of the underhanded, more grown mages in the towers. This really makes Sion mad hearing that, and his friends already know that, and we obviously then see a mad Sion tells Bernthal not to apologize, as they are also adults of the Institute just like he is, and Bernthal was only doing his job. Bernthal then smiles as he hears that and says that he is glad that he understands, but with that aside, he explains that he is afraid that a punishment is in order for Sion for treating him like one of the malefactors, telling him that from now on, he must call him Big Brother Bernie, just as he did when they were little. This really shocks Sion, and he then screams out with all that he can that he is never going to do that. But after all of that, we cut to Shade. One of the Gotia members asks her what they should do. Shade, however, is just in her head as she wonders what to do. She thinks that there it is again, that awful feeling she got when she first met Will, explaining that she can't seem to believe it, and that the tower they have been in is in the palm of their hand. We then see Shade getting angry as she screams out. She tells Charles to do something, and that he is the one who moved up the timing of that barrier. But Charles has a strange tone, as he asks her why he should do anything. Hearing that makes Shade super shocked and confused, but Charles tells her to open her eyes, saying that the fate of their comrades is sealed. 100 members of Gotia, 500 puppets, and 12,000 guards, explaining that all those pieces needed to be forfeited to make room for the one to take the board. Charles continues as he allows him to thank her for playing the game just as he desired, saying that he promises her that he will not let their brethren's sacrifice be in vain. He then gets a creepy smile as he tells them that he shall be the one to unseal the heavens. But as Shade hears that she is anything but happy, as she right away gets sent into a state of rage as she screams out, we then see her smashing her fist into the rooftop out of anger and destroying it. While she is extremely angry, we see another one asking her what they should do now. Shade, however, just tells them to destroy everything. She starts to scream out with all that she can, and tells them to bring out every last one of those vile beasts in the tower and drag their bodies across the streets. After that, we see a big explosion happening around Lihana and Will. Lihana looks at the Gotia members and explains that their movements have changed, saying that they're not organized like they were before, and that it looks like they've lost all sense of self-preservation as they have gone completely mad. This really makes Will think, as he wonders what could have been communicated to make them act this way, wondering if they have broken ranks, or if this could all just be a distraction to achieve their ultimate goal. But as he says that, it seems like something clicks for him, as he then screams at Lihana to come with him, telling Julius that he needs to take care of things. Here, Julius firstly gets a bit happy, as he smiles before screaming at him to do less talking and more moving, telling him that he needs to go and do what he has to do. As Will hears that, he also gets a slight smile before he then looks up at the tower and knows that victory for the tower's within reach. But Gohita can still win the day if they manage to seize Baal and break the Great Barrier. But as he says that, Lihana calls out to him and tells him to do this, and he says that they are on it. We then see him looking super fired up as they are running side by side, and they scream that they are going to take down Charles. With that, we actually see Charles as he tells them to go wild and kill each other even. He starts to look manic as he says that while they squabble like fools, he will make Baal his. However, as he is going there, we see a colorless mage seeing him and saying that the flying golem prototype's been activated and that it just broke through the tower wall, continuing and saying that it's going up, wondering if he is flying straight to where the Magiavander are and if someone needs to stop him. With that, we cut back to Will, who, as he looks at this, says that Charles has got a flying golem and that he is using it to get to Baal at the top. Lihana, however, tells him that it's impossible, saying that the Magiavander's spells on the outside of the tower will take care of him before he even gets close. Will then tells her that not anymore, it won't, explaining that Charles deactivated the Collis panel to release the guards. He did it to disable the spells that protected the tower. Lihana then says that weakening the tower's defense by forcing the Magiavander to deal with the guards was only a part of his plan, and calls him a devious snake, which actually goes pretty hard. After that, we get to Will, who thinks that it was all calculated from the very beginning, down to the smallest detail. While they thought they were one step ahead, Charles goes another step further. Claire and Ceridwen have their hands full fighting the crazed Gotia mages. Lihana and he are likely the only ones with enough time to go after Charles. But just as he says that, Will suddenly stops and looks at some guy standing at a building. He looks closely at him and wonders if it might be the mage who's been watching them. He might be the source of the bizarre hide spell from previously. But then, this mysterious man raises his wand right at them. Then, in the next panel, he fires 2 magic beams at them. But surprisingly, it looks like they went past both Lihana and Will, and instead hit 2 Gotia members standing behind them. Lihana looks back in total disbelief and wonders what just happened. Meanwhile, Will looks at the guy and wonders why he just protected them. But we then move to the guy who starts to take off his cape and tells them that he sees that trouble still follows them everywhere they go. After that, we see both Will's and Lihana's eyes get huge as they then scream out Werkner's name, who was the mysterious guy. Will asks if, this entire time, he was the one watching them. Werkner jumps down from the building and tells them that it was less watching and more guarding, explaining that after what happened to Emma, it was decided in secret that the sphere of protection around their young spies would need to be strengthened. He continues as he says that there weren't enough mages on hand to take the job. As such, they were called forth. He would have been more thorough if not for one little problem, which, as we know, was none other than Finn. But Will seems to have caught on to something that he said, as he asks Werkner if he said them, and Will then says something more. But sadly, we then cut scenes and see a bunch of Gohita members, but 2 of them seem to be a bit suspicious. The others ask them what they are doing, and the 2 suspicious members start to take off their masks, as they say that it was quite foolish to unleash spies in the tower and assume that their ranks are impenetrable. Not even magic could cure such stupidity. With that said, we then see them being fully revealed, and they are Eliza and Edward, which is just so insanely sick. Eliza starts to laugh, and says that she will never get over how creative Bernthal was with their codenames. Edward's was just himself, asking her if that isn't right, and calling him Viper. But just then we see Edward having a stone face as he tells her to be silent and calls her a leech, telling her that he better not hear another word from the blood-sucking abomination. This really seems to make Eliza snap, as even her veins start to pop out. She then starts to walk forward and tells Edward to call her that again. and it will be the last thing that ever comes out of his mouth. We then see Eliza starting to get ready and lock in as she says that they wouldn't want to upset Werkner by turning Edward into a corpse, right? With that said, we then see her use her Blythe Vanja attack, which seems to create a ton of dark spikes which pierces into the Gohita members. After that, we cut to Lihana, who asks if Edward and Eliza are also in on it. Werkner tells them that it took them some time to destroy that special barrier's spell points. They were late when they were needed most, and for that he is sorry. But even then, he has a bright smile on himself, as he tells them that the two of them did a wonderful job holding things down. Werkner then takes his hands and pats both Will and Lihana on their head, which is so wholesome and cute. He then continues as he tells them that he is sure that they have seen, but their enemy is prepared to fight to the very last. They must help ease the situation on the first stratum, or things will only get worse. With that said, he suddenly starts to make a whistle noise with his hands, and we then see his dragon landing next to him. And I have no words to be able to formulate how insane this is, but this is truly so sick. Just the way that the dragon lands, right by him. Anyway, Werkner tells them that as for Charles, he will leave the two of them to him. We then cut to Lihana, who looks exactly like what I did as she has stars in her eyes and is just in pure amazement. She thinks that it's the fabled Werkner's dragon, Lindworm. Explaining that she's so much cooler in person, Werkner then goes to hand her a pair of goggles. He tells her that anyone fast enough to smash his sky racing time should be able to catch up to him, asking Lihana what she says and calls her Miss Record Breaker. And this is just so sweet because in the next panel she screams out to leave Charles to them, and not long after we see the two of them soaring high into the sky, Lihana tells Will to hold on tight, and he says that he has got it, and he then starts to grip around Lihana. This, however, makes her scream out in a matter of nanoseconds. Will, oblivious as he is, asks Lihana what is wrong. Lihana just tells him that he is holding her too tight. He is not even her suitor, and asks him if it would kill him to be a little more considerate. Will, however, just asks her what she is talking about and tells her to hurry up and that they need to go right away. But we then spot Lihana just being in a confused state as her eyes are spinning like never before while telling Will that she can't until he stops. But she will have to come back to reality quickly as we then see a ton of attacks heading right to them. Will screams at her to wake up, explaining that those missiles are coming right at them. Then in the next panel, it looks like we see them going straight down with Lindworm as both of them seem to scream out. We then get into Lihana's head and she thinks that if she doesn't get herself together, then Will's going to fly right off. She tells herself that she is an honorable knight of House Owenzaus, not some doe-eyed lady. Lihana then looks back right at Will, and she looks rather strange, but she tells Will to hold on to her as tight as he can. Will just asks her if she is sure that it's what she wants. Lihana tells him to just do it already, telling him that she is Roish, the noble knight, and that he is her princess, Henrietta, once again telling Will to grab on. Will then tell her fine and go to get another grip. After that, surprisingly, it looks like they are doing alright, as they at least seem to be heading straight. While they are doing that, we see Werkner just looking at them from the ground and smiling. We then cut back to his and Finn's interaction. Finn told him that this is what he needs, telling Werkner to do as he says, and he may just give him a piece of the knowledge that he is looking for, about Will, swords, or whatever he wants to know. We then go back to Werkner's brain as he explains that there he did it. He sent Will to the top into sure peril, just as Finn wanted, thinking that as treacherous as it may be, he too knows there's something they need to see. Anyway, with that done, we head back to Will and Lihana, and they have just spotted Charles is ahead of them, and Lihana says that they are not much farther from the apex and that Lindworm will get them right up on him. But we then cut to Charles, who says that the generation of disquiet doesn't know when to quit. After he said that, we can see him taking out his wand and directing it back. After that he says, Shana, Lock of Thunder, reactivate. This leaves both Will and Lihana pretty scared as they say that he's restoring spells he already deactivated and ask how that is even possible. But just then, we see a ton of magic circles in front of both Will and Lihana, and they say that here it comes. The might of the Magia Vander raining down on them at full force. And now they really mean the full force, as we see so many different attacks being headed right to them. Lihana is trying her absolute best to get around them, but even she says that there's no maneuvering around this one. After that, we sadly see a big explosion happening right by them. But surprisingly, as the smoke clears, we can see both Will and Lihana, who seems to be unscratched. And instead they look ahead of them, and they scream out that it's a guardian, and not just any guardian, but instead Sion's guardian. He then screams at them to not dare to stop, telling Lihana to go and take that flunky to the top. Under him, it's Bernthal who looks at this and says that now this is a form of the House of Ulster's falcon he has yet to see, saying that the power of friendship is great indeed and asking Sion if he isn't correct. This just pisses Sion off as he tells him to be silent and that if he wanted his opinion, then he would ask for it. Bernthal just looks at him and asks him if he has already forgotten his punishment. This just makes Sion even madder as he tells him to yet again be silent, but this time he calls him Big Brother Bernie. Sion then cuts away from that as he screams that he has opened a path for them, telling them to now go and finish the job. Calling them thunderheaded buffoons, we then see Lihana, who says that she didn't know that he was capable of summoning such a powerful guardian. Will just thinks that it's amazing and that he has gotten stronger, and he has no doubt that his strength will only continue to grow, but that goes for him also, and there's only one way to go from here. With that out of the way, Will tells Sion thanks for the protection and says that they will make the best of it, and he promises that. With that, Lihana says that now up they go, and they have an insane speed behind them, which is just sick. But then randomly, we cut to Iris, who says that Charles was the mastermind, asking who would have thought that, saying that she prefers not to praise adversaries, but it's hard to deny the skill it takes to get this close to Bal. But unfortunately for him, Aaron has already anticipated this much. Iris then looks serious as she calls out to Aaron, telling him to bring his hammer of light down upon him, and that it's time to put an end to this dark chapter. But suddenly someone asks them what the rush is for. We then see Finn stepping into the room. Iris calls him Inves and asks what he is doing here. Finn tells her that seeing as she refuses to call him Finn, he refuses to give her an answer. But after that, he goes to Aaron and tells him that he is never tired of scheming, is he? But he then tells him that he has got a proposition for him. He has a smug face as he asks Aaron what he says about sitting back and watching for a bit, saying that he doesn't know about Aaron, but Finn himself is curious to just see how Bale will react to a sword, and we then see Aaron just closing his eyes. Anyway, after that, we head back to Charles. He lands and says that assuming the information he gleaned from the Collis panel is accurate, it should be here. He then smiles and says that he was spot on, but right behind him are the others, and Will says that he just saw Charles. Lihana tells Will that he got inside, but that she thinks that they can still catch up to him. With that, we see them also heading down and running down a bunch of stairs. They then get to the bottom and wonder if this is some kind of hidden passageway. Lihana tells him that there is no time to think and that they just need to go as they are going. Will thinks that he has never been to the top of the tower before, but still, he can just feel that there's something off about this place. He looks a bit hesitant as he says that whatever it is, it's making his skin crawl. Suddenly Lihana tells him to look and that it's light ahead, and with that, the two of them run to the end, but there they see a huge creature hanging upside down with a bunch of weapons on it. They then see Charles, who smiles and says that here it is, in all its glory. We see both Will and Lihana looking to be filled with despair, but Charles continues and says that the very key to the end and to the beginning is none other than the king of the celestial hosts and lord of destruction, Baal, and to be fair, he looks pretty sick. After that, we head straight into Will's head as he looks at the creature and wonders if this is really Baal and the key to the Great Barrier, but he wonders how this could be a key to anything. But while he is confused, we see Lihana starting to freak out, saying that she can't believe it. We see blood coming out of both her nose and eyes as she questions if this monstrosity is a celestial host. Suddenly, she falls down to the floor. Will notices her, but right then and there she starts to scream as loud as she possibly can. Will gets to her and asks her what's wrong. We see that even Kiki is super concerned for her. Will even starts to look super serious as he asks her what's wrong, but as he says that, he can see some blood dripping from him. He then realizes that just looking at it sends their veins into a frenzy. Every drop of blood in their bodies is rejecting its existence. Will starts to look genuinely scared as he wonders what this thing is and if it's really a celestial host and their one true enemy. But just then, we see Charles, who is also bleeding like crazy, but he starts talking, asking if they can feel the fear, if they can hear their bodies screaming agony, explaining that it's the power of Baal. Charles just continues as he says that before they gang up on the bearer of truth, the very being, the magical world captured 5 centuries ago through sheer luck. He starts to walk closer as he explains that it is the reason why the tower believes the downfall of this world is inevitable, why they treat the lore as more than mere fairy tale, why do they continue to prepare for the day of ruin. But after that we see Charles raising his wand as he says that now they shall witness history as he releases Baal and replaces the false sky above their heads with a sky of truth. As Will hears that, he screams out towards Charles and tells him to stop, explaining that breaking the seal will doom them all. However, Charles is too far gone as he screams out, telling Baal to be free, to wreak havoc, and to bring this twisted world to its knees. But just then, out of nowhere, it looks like a bunch of blood starts to splash out of Ball, and it all drops on top of Charles, who is super confused. Not long after, he starts to freak out as it seems that he is in immense pain. Suddenly, his body starts to transform, and his muscles start to become weird before we can then almost not even see his face as it's starting to get covered up. It then gets dark in the room, as Will and Lihanna can do nothing but watch. And not even that long after, we see this weird-looking monster being right in front of them and screaming right at them. We see the monster going to attack as they take their hand and start to fire it right at Will. Will, however, isn't sure what to do, so Lihanna has no choice but to gather her strength as she takes her wand and starts to circle around the arm with her lightning and destroy it. Lihanna then looks back at Will and tells him not to hesitate, telling him that this thing is no longer a mage, but instead it's just a straight-up monster. Just then, we see the monster slamming their foot into the ground. With that, we then get to Lihanna, whom we see is heading to a wall, but then, out of nowhere, we see some strange spikes coming out of the wall. Those spikes go right through her body, and she throws up even more blood, but it doesn't even end there, as the monster then sends her flying. She flies right into a wall, and Will just calls out her name. We then get to him, and we see how nervous he is, but he has to start to lock in soon as the monster slams her arm right next to him. But even then, Will thinks that something is different. He explains that this monster's not at all like the ones they fought before. He can feel the hatred he has toward it coursing through his entire body. He finally ends it by calling it a primal revulsion. He grips his sword tightly as he says that he has a deep disgust, but that he has to fight it, saying that no matter how much he wants to cry or laugh himself insane, he has to do this and he has to fight. Will thinks back to his friends and knows that if he hesitates now, then it will turn them all into monsters. After that, we see Will jumping up, and then we see the goat that he is actually slashing the monster's arm. Lihanna, who is on her knees, sees this and knows that she has to help, so she uses her Thaddeus Leo attack right at it. We see her attacking, hitting it spot on, and the monster then starts to scream out in pain. But after its little outrage, we amazingly see its entire body starting to regenerate and heal its wounds, which leaves both Will and Lihanna really shocked. But then, it surprisingly falls down to the ground. But it seems like it was just a trick, as in the next panel, we see it having a ton of dark magic circles around them, and it then screams out as they use some strange magic attack. We see Will managing to dodge it, and Kiki thankfully coming to save Lihanna from the attack. But it's just too many attacks, so in the end it doesn't help, and both of them get sent back. Lihanna wonders how it is able to cast such powerful magic with just a scream. Explaining that there wasn't even an incantation, Will also thinks that it's unbelievable, saying that whatever that was, it was stronger than most high-grade spells. But as they think about all of that combined, both of them know that if they allow this affront to mages, to all life, and leave this place, then their world is without a doubt doomed, and we see both of them looking extremely scared. But sadly, we cut scenes here and instead see an out-of-breath Sarissa explains that she never thought that Walter was willing to leave behind an arm just to escape, and we then see one of his arms stuck in ice, but him being nowhere in sight. But that's not for long, as we then see him running and saying that this isn't over, and that he won't allow himself to fall here. After that, he suddenly stops and looks around, explaining that he has not exacted judgment on the pinnacle of that tower and the entire magical world for rejecting him. But just then, someone comes by and tells Walter and calls it old delusions. We don't have to wait long before we see that it's none other than the goat, Edward, who looks super cold. Walter just screams out and asks him how he dares to confront him, saying that they are factions, brothers. Edward jumps down to him and tells him that he doesn't recall associating himself with a dogmatic simpleton. Walter tells him that he can deny him all he wants, but Edward fell as short as he did from becoming a Magia Vander. We then see Edward looking a bit sad as Walter tells him that he knows the hate he harbors for those gifted few, for the world that kept him from greatness, calling him a failure, a fallen mage turned educator, forced to teach remedial magic to little children whom he now defends. We then see a quick flashback with Cariot looking at Edward, who we can see done on the ground, and we see how filled with despair Edward looks as Walter continues and tells him that an ordinary man like him could never match his genius. He then screams at Edward and tells him that he will not let his purpose be belittled by an inept mage who ran from the tower with his wand between his legs. But just then, Edward cuts him off. He tells him that it's his understanding that he has yet to become an ascendant. Asking Walter if that is correct seems to leave Walter a bit shocked, but Edward continues and tells him that though it pains him to say, he will admit that his aptitude surpasses his own, but still, he has a question for him. He asks him how it is that an inept mage was able to reach the top, while Walter, a genius, wasn't able to. Edward starts to go closer to him and tells him that the answer is quite simple. He is lacking in tenacity, in strength of will, in the courage it takes to challenge the gifted. Edward starts to really look menacing as he tells Walther that he is a shut-in, a dour man who'd sooner spite the success of others than create his own. In protecting himself from a world he despises, he has become an imbecilic, irrational child, calling it utterly hopeless. This just makes Walther lose it as he screams out and curses. Edward and we then see him starting to get out an intense aura around himself, but even then it has nothing against Edward, who just swipes up his wand, and we then see Walther being surrounded by a bunch of magical circles, telling him that at the end of the day, he is not even on the level of the contemptible no talent. Walther is just in shock as he wonders when he had the time to make a chain circle, but he then thinks back and realizes he tells Edward that his long-winded lecture was him buying himself time. Edward just continues to go forward as he tells Walther that he shouldn't need more than one spell to take care of a mage of his caliber. With that, we see Edward using his Dax Darbican's attack to completely crush Walther. We see Walther starting to bleed out a ton as he says that it's just one single low-grade spell. He wonders how he could be bested by the Artless Ascendant, but perhaps he was a fool not to expect this from a mage who's driven him to insanity, from the notorious Viper of Perfection. And this panel right here is just pure cinema and pure art. But after that, we switch scenes, and we see Shade and Werkner. Shade asks Werkner if he enjoys this. She starts to look filled with desperation as she says that he is terrorizing the weak. Werkner looks sad as he calls her Monica and tells her to please stop. Shade, however, continues and tells him that she already told him when she was part of a faction. The tower is the zenith of the magical world. It is the arbiter, doing whatever it wants in the name of exterminating the celestial hosts. Dare to question its actions or just be different, and you are killed. We then see Shade looking extremely mad as she thinks that absolutely nothing has changed. In this world, it's always the weak that are left to suffer. We then see, from what we can guess, a younger version of Shade and her sister. We see their parents looking at them and smiling before her father gets a worried expression, followed by their mother, who gets the same expression. We then see a creepy guy in a chair coming in. He gives a book to Shade's sister. She then looks up and calls him Grandpa, and is about to thank him. But it then looks like she gets possessed, just like the maids behind the grandpa. Not long after, the book starts to emanate some black aura, and her sister's eye goes dark. Not long after, we get to the town where the citizens are going crazy. The text then says that the House of Burzem is found guilty of causing insurrection in Taralis with so-called puppets, and members are sentenced to death. We then see a ton of people well being dead in the center city, while Shade just looks at this and can't help but cry her eyes out. After that, we cut back to real time, where Shade tells Werkner that he doesn't know what it's like to be punished for being a bearer of a cursed magic that was forced onto her, to have their entire family ripped away, and not gonna lie, but I do actually start to feel somewhat bad for her. Shade continues and says that for suffering under their wands, they, the weak, should have the right to take from the strong, just as they have taken from them. Werkner is then going to tell her something, but Shades cuts her off as she asks him if he is having fun or not. But just then, we see a big explosion happening around Shade. Then, in the next panel, we see Eliza having her hands around Shade as she tells her that she most certainly is. She looks manic as she tells Shade that she adores hearing would-be tyrants gripe and grouse about their hardships, watching delusional degenerates get a taste of their own medicine. Telling Shade that nothing brings her more joy than the ridiculous ramblings of a floundering fool, Shade then starts to get mad as she gets away from Eliza and calls her a blood-sucking harpy as she tries to grab her. But it just ends up with Shade getting a kick right to her stomach and being sent back into a bunch of ruins. Eliza goes towards her and says that she will be the first to tell her. No amount of tears will excuse her from her own misdeeds, stating that she is sure everyone present would agree. Victimhood does not belong to her, telling her that cry all she likes, she will answer for her own actions. She then holds up her wand and says that she knows the perfect place where she can do just that, explaining that it's in a coffin. Silent and dark is where she will stay until she takes her last breath. We then see a bunch of chains appearing around Shade as she begs for them not to do it, and the last thing that she is able to see is Eliza's smile as she then gets completely buried in this coffin. Eliza then goes to Werkner and tells him that not every colleague deserves mercy. Being a bit older than she is, she thought that he already knew that. Werkner just looks at her and says her name, but she continues as she tells him to indulge a woman, and she may ask for more than he can give her. Eliza then goes right up to Werkner and puts her arm around his face and tells him that if he's going to be spoiling anyone, then let it be her and only her. We then see Werkner grabbing her hand before sadly taking it away from his face. he tells her that he won't be indulging anyone. He never has and never will. Eliza then seems to have a bittersweet expression on her face before something comes crashing down on her. Werkner seems to be really shocked and confused, but we then see that it was Claire. She tells them not to worry, as she is here to save them. While being on top of Eliza, Claire gets up to Werkner's face while pointing to Eliza and asks him if she has taken a bit of him or not. Eliza just gets mad as she tells Claire to get off her and calls her a grandma, and we then see Werkner, who just scratches his head. After that, he screams out saying that Gohita has been completely routed, and all remaining confrontations have been stemmed. The battle for the first stratum is over. We then cut to Wignall and Colette, who together say that all that's left is Will and Lihanna, and with that we also get right to them as we see Lihanna telling Will to come on. But before that, we get into yet another flashback as we see Charles. It starts with the text explaining that all he ever wanted was for his mother to be proud of him. We then see a young Charles with his mother sitting alone in the shadows. Charles looks at her and he can see that she is visibly hurting and that she has a ton of bandages around her. Seeing this makes Charles get up in an instant as he even starts to run and ends up falling on the ground. But then, when he had come out a little bit, he saw a flower blooming. Charles put out his hand into sunlight and he got a smile as he realized that he was there. After that, he goes to the flower and he calls out to his mother, who is still in the shadows. Charles tells her to look and that it's a flower. Asking if it isn't pretty, Charles just has a huge smile while his mother looks at him extremely mad. In the next panel, we see the flower being crushed. After that, we see his mother on top of him and beating him. Charles thinks that he only wanted her to be gentle with him. Meanwhile, his mother asks him how he could dare. She tells him that when she steps out in the sun, her skin feels like it's been set on fire. If she doesn't get to enjoy its warmth, then neither should he, explaining that this horrible world has done nothing but cast her aside. In the next panel, we see her choking Charles as she screams out, wondering why it blessed him but not her, telling Charles that he doesn't deserve anything. But when Charles is legit on the verge of, well, dying, suddenly a magic circle appears behind his mother, and it then pierces right through her. Charles is then finally able to breathe out, but he then gets back to his senses and calls out to his mother, but he can just see her lifeless body falling to the floor. With that, he starts to scream out as he thinks that he didn't want her to die. His mother's gruesome death and the pain that consumes his very soul all lie on the shoulders of this world. We then see an older version of him as he explains that the world deserves nothing but utter destruction and that he wanted to be the one to meet it, saying that in his search for power, he found himself knocking on Gothia's door. Their fellows were unique, and yet not so. A girl whose family was punished, a man not unlike himself, a talent gone unrecognized. They, the dregs of society, came together as one, all to serve a purpose, to uncover the false sky and deliver into this flawed realm, a world of truth that would allow it to be born anew. If he achieved this, he thought that his mother would finally be proud of him. And with that said, we also see the monster going ham and shooting out a ton of attacks, which surprisingly both Will and Lihanna seem to be dodging flawlessly. Or I might have said that too early, as we actually see Lihanna getting a cut on her leg, which makes her fall down onto the ground. She looks to be pretty out of breath as she then looks up to this insane monster. Will then screams out her name, but Lihanna isn't going to just sit down as she then uses her own Psyche, Lisolda Dua attack, and gets a ton of lightning around her as she flies right above the monsters and then uses her Patras Aior attack right above it. We see Lihanna screaming out and using all of her power, and it seems to actually be working as she manages to pierce right through it. We then see its body parts being scattered all over the place. We then head into her brain as she thinks that the resilience of its flesh and mighty attacks are unlike anything that Lihanna has ever seen. Strength they can try to match, but there's nothing they can do about its ability to regenerate. We then head to Will, who thinks that everything they throw at it amount to nothing. They burst it apart, and it just puts itself back together. Lihanna then adds on that it defies every school of magic. If they can't figure out a way to disable its regeneration, then they will never defeat it. But while she is in her head and thinking, we can see a piece of its body besides her starting to act weird. But when she finally realizes and looks over, it's already too late, as it then explodes right next to her. Lihanna ends up getting sent right into the wall and only adding on to her injuries. Meanwhile, the monster uses this as their chance to get her out, as he sends a dark beam attack directly at her. But luckily, Will isn't going to let that slide as he sees this, and runs with all that he possibly can towards Lihanna to try and save her. We then see that he managed to arrive right in time, as he protected her with his sword, and even took the monster's attack and infused it with his sword. Now with his sword being primed up, he grabs it tightly before running directly at the monster, Will then manages to get in an insane-looking slash directly through the monster's body. Or that's just what it looked like from the outside, as when we get closer, we see that the attack didn't hit, but that instead seems to have been blocked by a barrier. Will tells himself to just do it and to cut through it, telling himself to push further and to remember what's at stake right here. But just then, we see a weird-looking structure appearing on the outside of the monster's body, and it's screaming out. Will gets shocked, but then tells himself to come on and that he just has to do it. But then we sadly leave them and head into a flashback. We see Charles calling out to Will. Charles tells him that he heard about Julius, saying that he was so young and that it was a real shame. Will looks sad as he says that it truly is. Charles then continues and asks him if it isn't awful how so full of sadness this world is. He then asks Will if he could, would he change it, and asks him what kind of world he wants. Will is just caught off guard and doesn't know what to say. But Charles, on the other hand, tells him that he would like a world where everyone has a reason to smile. After that, we get back to the fight. But it looks like as Will thought of his interaction with Charles, he lost focus. As in the next chapter, we see his goggles being slightly destroyed before he is then sent back. Will looks to be in real pain as he tries to get up, but even then, he calls out to Charles, asking him if he is there and to say something. We then, yet again, see that face from earlier trying to get out. With that, we head into Charles's brain as he says that he was so sure that finding the truth would earn him his mother's approval, but nobody told him that the truth would be this frightening, explaining that it is monstrous and disgusting. He wonders why that is, and if he just maybe was wrong. He continues as he says that it hurts, and he then calls out to his mom to save him, but he then scratches that as he changes it and asks for just anyone to save him, and we then see the monster seemingly transform yet again. Will sees all of the blood splashing around on the floor, but he looks closely at the silhouette of the face that is screaming out of pain. This finally makes him snap into reality as he understands that he is in pain and crying out for help, begging to just be freed. After that, he tells Charles that it's all right as he explains that he will defeat him and free him from his suffering. And that's why Will is just the absolute GOAT, as he looks so insanely cold right here. Right after that, we see Will getting out his sword as he says, Prime Pathos, but on top of that he also uses his Terai's Whis reloaded, which is sick. Lihana seems to be pretty shocked, and we then see Finn with a slight smile. We then see him spectating from afar and saying that reloads lack the punch of a sword primed by an outside source of magic. But the question is, if Will can make it work or not, and he says that with a really smug face. With that, we then head back to Will, who this time uses another ability. This time it's the Load Burst, El Glace Froce, L1, and Ars Weiss, and this is just insane, as we see that Will created clones of himself, which seems to leave both Lihana and even Finn surprised. Anyway, back to Will, who in his head says that learning Prime Pathos from Miss Teridwen was the first piece, mastering Tactical Reload with Zio was the second, and now to complete the puzzle, with the third and final piece, it's of course Elfie's magic, and this is so hype. Will then thinks that if he wants to be free Charles, then he needs help from everyone. With that, all of the clones scream out, saying Prime Pathos revived, and the reload tactical ability. With that, we see the silhouettes of Colette, Wignall, Julius, and Scion, as well as Edward being behind each of them. Lihana on the side says that she can't believe it, and that he's loaded his sword with just about every element save light. Finn looks extremely happy as he thinks that he isn't just rapidly shuffling between elements in the middle of a rapidly shifting battle, but that he's combined multiple techniques to do something even greater. With that, he tells Will to let him see it, and for Will to scatter his expectations and show him the unknown. And that's exactly what Will is going to do, as we see all of his clones advancing forward. First off, we see one of them using Colette's Fullbeth Whiz ability and sending an extremely powerful strike. But after that, it's Wignall's turn, as Will uses his Zephyros Whiz, and that really seems to leave the monster hurting as it gets a bunch of slashes on itself. However, it's far from over, as Will then uses Julius's Glace Whiz and sends a ton of ice spears right at the monster. But I think that you already know by now that it's far from over, as next up, it's Scion, as he uses his Ignis Whiz ability and sends an insane fire sword strike right at the monster. But we can't forget about the GOAT, Edward, who is next up, and will use their Dax Whiz, which sends an insane dark magic strike at the monster. After all of those 5 extremely powerful attacks, we see that the monster is getting injured more and more, and seems to be on its last legs, but even then it's holding on. And Lihana is super shocked by that, thinking that Will put so much power behind his assault, and it's still not enough. But we then move to Will, who gets close to his sword and uses his Prime Pathos revived and the Dallas Whiz, a tactical reload ability. With that, he then looks back and calls out for Lihana. Lihana's eyes get huge as she hears her name being called out. She then looks right at Will and knows that he believes in her. He trusts that she will rise to meet this challenge. Lihana then grips tightly onto her wand as she thinks that she is a knight. And when a knight's companion calls her to action, by her vow, she must answer. And with that said, we then see both Will and Lihana being side by side as they scream out and charge at the monster. Will thinks that there's only one way to defeat an enemy that can regenerate. They must lay waste to its flesh faster than it can heal itself, and with lightning fast speed, they will overwhelm it, as only the Thunder faction can. And that sure is true, because just look at this madness. They are really going absolutely crazy on it. After that, they get some distance, but not for long, as they then head right back. But while they are on their way, we think back to Guilford. They imagine him telling them to run faster, harder, never forget their teachings. And that speed is law, explaining that they need to shine brighter and move quicker. Show the world how tenacious they are and calls them maggots, ending it by telling them to bloom loud, storm forth and become a thunderbolt. And with that said, we see the two of them charging right at the monster and seemingly cutting right through it. As in the next panel, we see its entire flesh being cut off and the whole creature falls down to the ground with no sign of regenerating. However, we see the face silhouette on the ground, and it calls out in agony before then slowly losing its voice, as they, or rather Charles, calls out to his mom. After that, we cut to both Lihana and Will, who both look super worn out, but they then look at each other and finally breathe out and smile. But just then we see something starting to laugh, and next we see Bal ripping away the skin above his teeth, and with that, he looks right at them as he starts to hysterically laugh, which is so creepy. We see both Will and Lihana being in total disbelief and confused by this, but that's when Finn comes by. He tells Bal that there's nothing more irritating than his laugh, telling Bale that it's enough and that he is no god, and Finn just has so much aura.